Hey, Shabbat Shalom. This is this is Torah Portions here on Torah Apologetics. I'm Sean. Thanks for joining us. And here, this is Kingdom in Context, the channel. So I appreciate you joining us today. We have a wonderful portion, in my opinion. We're going to actually be discussing how the Israelites left Egypt and how the Egyptians reacted at that point. We'll look at some of the behind the scenes motivation of what caused the Egyptians to pursue the Israelites after they let them go. And then what happens, of course, when they get to the Red Sea, as well as what happens after they get over the Red Sea and they're no longer being chased. So there's some interesting stuff to talk about and break down. If you guys just give me 1 minute, I've been having some technical issues behind the scenes here, trying to get something uploaded to my studio so that we can have the proper show. It's still trying to upload, so we'll just let that happen. Guys, thanks for being here. There's already quite a few people in the chat. And I just want to say hello to Windfeather is here, Miss Marcia, D Love, Miss Joyce here, David Shearer, Travis Bearden, Eddie Steckinger, The Line Within Us, Carla Malberg. Welcome, everyone. Mike Lascala, Yaya Q, Rita McAvoy, Paula Disciple. Let me see here. Gabby and Grafted, Justina Mead, Hannibal's back, Gilbert Miranda. Welcome, everybody. Norma De Los Santos is here. Welcome, welcome. Lizzie B, D Love, Hallelujah. Welcome, everybody. Quite a few people in the chat already. Well, hopefully y'all are ready to dig into the Bible. I thought to myself, sometimes we do these Torah portions and I just kind of get started. Because I'm so excited myself. I'm a word nerd. I'm excited to actually jump into the Bible, start reading it and studying it. But hopefully everyone that prays for us, that gives us loving, encouraging support. Hopefully you guys understand that we greatly appreciate it. The messages you sent us, the letters that you've sent us. If you have sent us a message or letter and I wasn't able to respond to you, please don't be offended. Please don't take it personal. I just get too many. This is why we do the live shows, both on our Kingdom Cast channel, as well as here doing these weekly Torah portions. We're starting a new devotional series. It's called Every Word. And the whole idea is that, we can actually interact with you, that you have the live chat where you can actually talk with us today. You can ask a question. And the way we got this set up is you can actually ask a question after each portion that we read. So as you see on the bottom left hand of the screen, our Torah portions today is going to cover Exodus 13:17 through chapter 17, verse 16. So that's 3.5 chapters. And after each chapter, you have an opportunity to actually call into the show, and that's gives you the opportunity. I mean, just make sure you have your hair did and your shirt on or whatever. But this gives you the opportunity to call in live if you want. You can speak and ask me any question you want. We would prefer it's about the content we're actually reading and studying, but you may just have another question. So we're always willing to answer any biblical question you may have. Please try to make it relevant to the Bible if you can't make it relevant to what we're actually talking about in the video today, because that's just, more beneficial for everyone watching. But I'm going to put this link in the live chat right now, and I'm also going to drop it in the video description in case you join the live chat a little bit later. You guys give me 1 second. I'll go ahead and do that. This is something I'm only able to do after I start the show. So let me go in here real quick and do that. But ultimately, we really appreciate your prayer support, your words of encouragement, also your financial support. There's people that support us, through all the different means you see in the video description. You guys are amazing. You're really helping us do what we're doing, and we hope that we can continue to be a blessing to everybody. And hey, guys, tell me in the chat, how's my mic sound? Is the volume level sound okay this week? I've been having some questions about my mic working. So just let me know in the chat if you can hear me well. All right, guys. Also, just if you've never seen this before, before we start jumping into the scriptures, I am, a lot of people don't realize this, and for some reason it doesn't, just people really, really struggle with this, especially that's why I have the intro that explains the idea of what the word Torah is as far as its cultural relevance. The word Torah just means the instructions. It's just God's instructions for us to live. It's not particularly something that's just Jewish, right? I'm not someone that's raised in a Jewish family. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, but I do the behavior of Jesus Christ, which is the instructions of God. So the instructions of God have been culturally linked to this word Torah, because that's what the word Torah means in Hebrew, is instructions. So I'm a believer. I've been a believer for 22 years, more than 22 years at this point, and I've been studying the Bible for that long. And a lot of people struggle to take some things seriously because they don't really know, they've never heard my background or anything. I've got one of my testimonies on my channel if you want to go look at that later. But studying the Bible for 22 years, and I call myself a word nerd. I try to actually study it and not just take the traditions of men and pass those on. I try to actually study it for what it says, look at its context. There's 10 easy ways to find context when you're reading scripture. And I actually have done an entire video on that. That's also here on the channel. And this is the approach, if you will, that I apply to reading the scriptures, is looking for context as we go through them, so we don't take things out of context. That's kind of when you get in trouble. And that's what leads into all these different denominations that we have across the world. They're all believers in the Father and the Son. They all believe and are waiting their resurrection at some point, but they're just, when you take things out of context, it can leave you in a very superficial state of lots of confusion, lots of contradictory answers as you try to approach different things in the scripture. So we just try to keep it easy, keep it in context, look up the definitions of words, cross-reference where these ideas are being spoken of in multiple books, and look at the surrounding context. And it really helps you understand the scriptures clearly and quickly. And in my opinion, it's going to equip you to better go and explain these concepts to your friends, families, and then even strangers in the future, if it's on your heart to evangelize people. So this is what I hope to help people with. This is our goal. It's our passion. So no, I don't have a beard. Everyone always asks me about Leviticus 19:27. They're like, why don't you have a beard? Well, for one, that's not a commandment in scripture. That was a specific command about the pagan nations around Israel that were worshiping other gods, and how they would mar their beards in worship to other gods. In the Canaanite region, it was an actual practice of their pagan beliefs. So there's no specific instruction in the Bible that tells you have to grow a beard. For all those out there, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I may have a beard in the future at some point. I've had one in the past. Don't have one now. It doesn't stop you from knowing the word. It doesn't stop you from teaching the word. So, hopefully that's not a distraction to you. Hopefully you're able to look beyond that, if you will. So guys, I really appreciate everybody. And like I said, just take the link that I gave you if you want to call in after we finish and I'm going to have some companion passages, and you can call in while I'm reading those, and you can either discuss what we read in the main portion or in the companion passages. Either way, okay? All right, guys, so we'll get started. Let me get this pulled up. Okay, so we're going to start in Exodus 13, and this is going to start where we picked off, where we stopped, and we'll pick up this week where we stopped last week. It's going to be in Exodus 13 and verse 17. It says, it came to pass, when Pharaoh had let the people go, that God led them not through the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest peradventure the people turn back when they see war, and they return to Egypt. But God led the people out through the way of the wilderness of the Red Sea. And the children of Israel went up harnessed out of the land of Egypt. And Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had straitly sworn the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones away hence with you. And they took their journey from Sukkot and encamped in Etham in the edge of the wilderness. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, to go by day and night. He took not away the pillar of cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people. So that's the end of that particular passage, guys. It's very short. We're just finishing up chapter 13. And I think what's interesting, a lot of people don't realize this, but what is interesting is that the first place they stopped when they actually left the borders of Goshen is they went to a place called Sukkot. And I think this is a beautiful foreshadowing to the coming of the second coming of the Yeshua, what we call the resurrection day, whereas we actually leave. We're going to be leaving the ground, if you will, as we have a new resurrection bodies, as Isaiah 26, 19 through 21, and 1 Thessalonians 4, 13 through 16 expounds upon. This is also the resurrection moment in Matthew 13:30, the angels that are sent out to gather the wheat to take it to the barn. So we're actually resurrected. Angels will come escort the resurrected to the point where we'll go to the New Jerusalem that's about to descend, right? We're going to the barn, which is the New Jerusalem. The New Jerusalem is a big tabernacle. It's a big house. That's what a Sukkot is. So there's a unique, subtle reference here as they're leaving Goshen, which is the enemy's chasing them, and the first place they go is to a tabernacle, a place called Tabernacle, which I think is a beautiful thing, right? So this is the same thing that we're going to do. We are taken to the tabernacle of God, as the New Jerusalem is called in Ezekiel 37 and other places. So I think this is a really interesting little parallel, if you will, to that idea. The first place they go is Sukkot. All right, so we have a companion passage here in Isaiah 4. We're going to actually discuss a little bit about that tabernacle in multiple passages here before we jump into chapter 14. So it says in Isaiah 4, 2-7, "In that day shall the branch of the Lord be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of the earth shall be excellent and comely for them that are escaped of Israel. And it shall come to pass that he that is left in Zion and he that remains in Jerusalem shall be called holy, every one of them that is written among the living in Jerusalem." A lot of people get tripped up on this language, guys. They think, wait a minute, he that's left in Zion, he that remains in Jerusalem. Well, these aren't, they think, they don't, most people really struggle with the idea of what the resurrection is and what's promised to you in the covenant after you're resurrected, where you're taking. So they think these are people that aren't resurrected, that just are still alive. But let me explain. Joel 3, Matthew 13, the angels burn the entire land area where the New Jerusalem is going to sit down, the land that's promised in Genesis 15 to Abraham, from the Euphrates to the Nile, the 1,500 square mile block, if you will. That whole land is, the valleys are raised up, the mountains are falling into their valleys, and they're leveled out. The land's leveled out. The land is burned with fire. It becomes an incredibly sound foundation that's been purified and cleaned by the angels who burn that entire area with fire. There's no one left in that whole area, because there's a big city that, you guys remember the Wizard of Oz, where at the beginning of the Wizard of Oz, the house drops on the Wicked Witch, or on was it the Wicked Witch or the Good Witch? Either way, the house drops on one of the witches in the Wizard of Oz. The New Jerusalem's going to come down and drop on this area, this 1,500 square mile area. The angels are preparing the land for it to set down. So anything that's in that land, this is why Zephaniah 1 and a whole bunch of other places, Matthew 13, 49-51, it explains the angels go and they're going to remove everybody from that land, make sure they're all out of there. They're going to go house to house if they have to. And anyone that tries to fight them, they're going to be killed, right? Because this is what the enemy does. This is why Armageddon is inside that land area. And Armageddon is where there's a large gathering of human forces and, in my opinion, non-human forces at that point, that want to actually fight against Yeshua and his angels that come back to establish the New Jerusalem there. So they're trying to stay in that land. That's why it says anyone that's found there that hasn't left and hasn't tried to leave and that's trying to fight them, they're going to be killed with the sword. Anyone that's found in there that doesn't try to fight them, they may be in captivity or whatnot, they'll just be removed by the angels. So all the whole purpose is that the people that actually fall down, or excuse me, the New Jerusalem that actually comes down and sits on that piece of land, that is the tabernacle that is our inheritance. It's Revelation 21, 1-7, right? It's the New Jerusalem, the bride. It's our inheritance that we are resurrected, taken into our places, our rooms that Yeshua mentioned he prepares for us. And this is where we go into this house. And as a result of this, that's our inherited area that we're going to live in. And that is Zion. That is going to be Jerusalem. It's called the renewed Jerusalem. It's just made bigger and better and eternal. And the whole idea is that everyone that's left there after that time will be holy unto the Lord, right? We'll be among the living, right? Because we'll have everlasting life. So this in verse 4, it says, the Lord shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion, right? That's going to be getting the wicked out of there and purifying and glorifying his people through the resurrection, and shall have purged the blood of Jerusalem from the midst thereof by the spirit of judgment and the spirit of burning. That's what I just explained, the process of cleaning out the land, getting the evil people out of there, and also burning the entire place to purify. And the Lord will create upon every dwelling place of Mount Zion and upon her assemblies a cloud and a smoke by day, and the shining of a flaming fire by night, for upon all the glory shall be a defense. And there shall be a tabernacle for a shadow in the daytime from the heat, and for a place of refuge, and for a covert storm, right? And for a covert from storm and rain, right? So this is referring to this wonderful place called Mount Zion. Literally calls it a Sukkot, a tabernacle, a house, a dwelling place, a booth, if you will, whatever word you want to give it. There's a lot of different ones that apply. This is very symbolic of why you celebrate every year the Festival of Booths, also called Sukkot, or the Festival of Tabernacles, because our homes are going to be inside this big one. It's a place of refuge. Okay, this is going to be an amazing time. So as we go into Zechariah 2, we're going to be speaking about this as well. Oh, thank you, Beetlejuice. I appreciate you. Thanks for the super sticker. Looks like you gave another one to keep up the awesome work, Sean. Thank you for teaching. Okay, yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. Thanks, Beetlejuice. I love the YouTube handle. All right, Zechariah 2. I think if I say it one more time, something happens, right? So I won't do it. Anyway, Zechariah 2, 1-5. It says, I lifted up my eyes again and looked, and behold, a man with a measuring line in his hand. Then said, Whither goest you? Or like, where are you going? And he said unto me, to measure Jerusalem, to see what is the breadth thereof, and what's the length thereof. And behold, the angel that talked with me went forth, and another angel went out to meet him, and said unto him, Run, speak to this young man, saying, Jerusalem shall be inhabited as towns without walls, for the multitude of men and cattle therein. Interesting, huh, guys? Do you ever wonder why there's cattle in heaven? Why is there cattle in New Jerusalem? Anyone have a idea, and you want to put it in the live chat, why there's cattle in the New Jerusalem? Verse 5 says, For I, saith the Lord, will be unto her a wall of fire round about, and will be the glory in the midst of her. All right, how amazing. This is also the promise of Ezekiel 37. Father and the Son descend. The glory of the Lord is in the midst of this amazing, huge tabernacle, the New Jerusalem, where we will live as resurrected saints to help and be as ministers unto the survivors of the world that live outside the city, who are repopulating the earth during the millennial reign. He's going to be a glory in the midst of her. There's fire round about. This is exactly why at the end of the millennial reign, when Satan's released and he goes out to deceive more people, and they come to fight the beloved city, which is the New Jerusalem. This is in Revelation 20, 7-10. Fire destroys those who are attacking the city. This is a very unique moment in prophecy, if you will, in the history of any type of established city, is that the city itself can defend itself. This is what's so unique about it. This is actually explained and prophesied in Isaiah 54, verse 13, where speaking to Zion, speaking to the New Jerusalem, the Father promises her, she's the bride, promises her, you will be able to defend yourself. If anyone attacks you, they will be destroyed because of you and not because of me. It's Isaiah 54:13. We see the fulfillment of that in Revelation 20, 7-10, when Satan tries to attack the New Jerusalem. So this is something where Yeshua doesn't have to get up off his throne. The angels don't have to put on the battle gear. The saints aren't going to go fight anybody. We don't have to worry. We're in a city that can defend itself. We are in a place of rest. We don't have to go to war. This is a beautiful, beautiful moment. Okay. So this is what's being referenced here in Zechariah 2. Some of the same descriptions about this amazing Sukkot that we go to after we're resurrected, after we're brought out of our metaphorical Egypt and Babylon. Verses 10-12 of Zechariah 2 says, Sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion, for lo, I come and I dwell in the midst of you, says the Lord. And many nations shall be joined to the Lord in that day, and shall be my people. And I will dwell in the midst of you. And you shall know that the Lord of hosts has sent me unto you. And the Lord shall inherit Judah his portion in the Holy Land, and shall choose Jerusalem again. Yes, yes, he shall. So this is an amazing, beautiful promise. Like I said, just talking about giving you some more time qualifiers of context as we discuss this moment in the future that hasn't happened yet, where he talks about the many nations, not just Israel, not just the resurrected saints of Israel, but many nations shall be joined to the Lord in that day. And this is what we've done teachings on this channel in the past, and I'll continue to talk about them in the future, where all the nations are brought before Yeshua for judgment. The ones that refuse his authority, the ones that refuse his judgeship, right? They don't like the way he does things. They're not going to stay. But the ones that are deemed sheep, the ones that actually agree with his behavior because they're practicing it in their own heart, that's in their internal disposition. This is the Matthew 25:31 moment. These are the people not resurrected. These are the many nations that are drawn to the Lord that are still alive after he shows up. They are given a choice, basically. Do you want to stay in this kingdom and participate in the behavior of the commandments of God, the Torah, the behavior of the Father and the Son, or do you want to do opposite behavior because you're not going to be able to, right? This is one of those deals where, because remember, opposite behavior of the Father and the Son means you create destruction and death. If you do the behavior of the Father and Son, you're creating peace and life. You're creating good things. You're doing good to your fellow man. You're loving the Lord and your fellow neighbor as yourself. Anything opposite of that creates death and destruction and pain. That's not going to be allowed to persist when Yeshua returns and establishes peace on the earth. So therefore, anyone that willfully chooses not to be a part of that will be taken out of the game. They'll go to Sheol, and all the remaining will reestablish the repopulation of the earth in the millennial reign, okay, who live outside the city. So what's so beautiful, though, is they'll still be considered joined unto the Lord. This is why in Isaiah chapter 2, verses 4 through 5, it talks about how the Torah, the commandments of God, the instructions for living, will go forth from Zion, from the New Jerusalem, to all these nations that are round about it and are needing to learn that kind of behavior because they've never truly been taught it. They were just doing it according to their conscience. So this is it's kind of a big, important thing. All right. So I had asked about the cattle. Why would it mention that there's cattle? We have why would the scriptures in Zechariah 2 mention that there was cattle in the New Jerusalem in Zion? And we have a couple people in answering that. Okay, Jeremiah 15:16 says, with cute emojis, says there's divine service. Yes, there's divine service. And what that means is that the cattle is a part of God's instructions for living. As someone else put down here a few minutes later, Kelly J is saying it's essentially a meal with the Father in his presence. That's what the priests would do with the animals, right? The oxen or the goat or the sheep. They would take and they would prepare a meal between them and the Father, and they would have a fellowship. They would, have a get together and create a meal, right? Yeah, and this is what we've said in the past. It can be likened into like a barbecue, like a family barbecue. You're getting together and have a fellowship meal. That's all it is, guys. But there is a lot of people really struggle with this. There is a growing disposition amongst a lot of very young believers who have not studied the actual Torah, the actual instructions of God in the first part of the Bible. There's a growing disposition among them that are rejecting meat. And a lot of them are doing this not on the basis of how the meat is slaughtered or whether there's hormones in it or not, but simply on the basis of their feelings that they don't like the fact that animals are used for food. This is something that's taught to people through ancient Hinduism, to be honest with you, which is just an offshoot of ancient Babylonian mysticism. This is what we also see happening in Egypt a few chapters back, where they had forbidden the Israelites to actually slaughter a sheep or a goat for Passover. And this is some of the conversation we read in the past couple of weeks between Pharaoh and Moses, where he was saying, hey, look, Pharaoh was like, just go sacrifice in the land. Instead of leaving to do your sacrifices, just go sacrifice where you are here in Egypt. And Moses and everyone were like, we can't. The Egyptians will stone us. We can't sacrifice here, because it's well documented in history that the Egyptians, or at least at certain points of the Egyptian kingdoms, they were living more of a vegan style lifestyle, which was synonymous with the Babylonian practices as well as ancient India. And this is even up to today. Ancient India is huge on veganism, right? They worship the cow, they worship the ox. This comes from Baal worship, and therefore they don't want to eat it. So also the Egyptians worshipped a god that was representative of a lamb, so they didn't want to eat these things that they were dishonoring their god or whatever. So this is just all branching off. And then in modern times, they try to put it under like, climate change. It's better to be vegan. Eating cows is going to cause climate change, all this nonsense. And then they also talk about, they try to sell it to a lot of good-hearted believers, saying that, well, there's harmful hormones, there's unsavory slaughtering practices, and there could be, don't get me wrong, but there are a lot of natural producers of meat everywhere in the United States and in most countries. We found a couple different places that my wife and I have ordered from, that there's no hormones or antibiotics or anything that's put into the animals, and they slaughter them humanely. There's a way to actually slaughter animals humanely. They've been doing it for thousands of years. It's instructed in the Torah. This is what the priests were doing at the temple. Lambs were not screaming. It's literally referenced in Isaiah 53, likening Yeshua going to the cross as a lamb brought with the priest before the temple to be slaughtered, that it is silent. It doesn't scream. All right. If it's screaming, you're doing it wrong. I'm sorry to inform you. It's not supposed to. It's supposed to be a silent. Anyway, I'm not going to all that. There's a lot more to it. For people that have actually slaughtered animals and know there is a difference what you can do. If you have slaughtered animals and it was in complete agony, I'm sorry, you were doing it wrong. So the whole point is this is part of the actual system that was designed for creation. So these sacrifices that we're reading about that are being practiced in the New Jerusalem are already going on in heaven today. This is exactly what Hebrews chapter 8, 1-5 tells us, that even Yeshua, our high priest, brings forth gifts and sacrifices as a part of his priesthood. And he's administering his priesthood in the heavenly temple and above today. So this is a huge deal for the Israelites trying to practice this and install this into this generation that had been in Egypt too long and forgot these practices, forgot this behavior of Israel. Because remember, Israel is the same moniker, if you will, that is given to the family of heaven above. We're all part of this, engrafted into this family of Israel, and the practices and behaviors thereof. Part of that is creating a fellowship meal with your Father. It's very simple. It doesn't have to be a religious thing. And this is the part we've done quite a few videos on this, and it apparently needs a healthy reminder from time to time, because there's so many people that struggle with this so greatly because of modern day assault against biblical principles. So hopefully that's something to put in your back pocket. People want to bring this up, you can go to Zechariah chapter 2 and Isaiah 4, and you can talk more about some of the descriptions of the incredible promised land that the saints are promised. All right, guys, let's go to Exodus 14. No one called in after the first chapter. So remember, after each chapter of the main portion, if you want to call in, chat's in the link or in the video description. You can use that link to call in and ask me any questions, or just provide your preferred commentary on what we just read. Just remember, we try to keep it to about 10 minutes. That way we can move on to the next chapter. So I'm going to jump in and Exodus 14, and we'll keep going. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel that they turn and encamp before. Okay, guys, we got someone calling in. So before I start chapter 14, I'll go ahead and take this call real quick. And it looks like we have Isaiah calling in. Hey, Isaiah, what's up?
Hey, hold on, I think it's messing up.
Yeah, just turn off your YouTube browser so that way you have an audio overlay.
Oh, okay, it works. Yeah, no, I was gonna say, like, I really wish more churches would like teach on the, like what you were just talking about, like the practices that, the priesthood did, it's going on in heaven, because they don't teach, like, I didn't know anything about that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that behavior was going on. And you're right about the veganism thing. I see like a huge push. Like I even see like some Christians online will teach that, like, before Adam and Eve sinned, they were vegan, or like they didn't eat animals in there. And I'm like, okay, like, I don't know, like when I would read the Old Testament and they would do sacrifices, like when I was younger, I never had an issue with it. Yeah. But over time, like you see like atheists make the argument, why would they do something barbaric? You got, the vegan people, they're like, oh, well, Yahweh's evil. Why would he do that? You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah,
no, like I don't,
because all of it's framed in with misunderstanding of what they were actually doing with those sacrifices. They weren't just killing animals for the sake of killing animals. They were literally creating meals for themselves to eat every day.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically they were taking the normal process that we all do, but they were doing them in a specific way so that it was considered sanctified unto the Lord, to have that normal process that men do all the day anyway, which is, create food for yourself. And they were doing it in a specific way so they could do it with the Father, so he could enjoy fellowship with him. That's what it was all about. And so, yeah, you're right. The world just tries to misrepresent it. They try to portray it in a way that's somehow bad, because this is what the enemy does. It doesn't like God's behavior, and it tries to vilify it.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
So yeah, and then as believers like you and I, it puts us in unique positions to try to defend, if you will, the loving behavior of our Heavenly Father. And you're defending it against a bunch of misconceptions. You're not defending it against people that are actually competent in the scriptures. You know what I mean? And like you said, you and I growing up, we were never taught competency in this subject matter, because we were always told, well, that was all for the Jews.
Yeah, that was like really weird to me, because I'm like, why would he? It was like a disconnect, like, oh, well, that's Old Testament, we're in New Testament, we do something different. And I'm like, why would he tell you to act a different way, I mean, that could mean, okay, he's going to tell you later on down the road to act a different way again. You know what I mean? Like, why
Mhm.
are we acting? I don't know. It's very strange. And then, yeah, I had one more question. Um, it's a little bit off topic, but it has to do. It was I was reading Second Peter, verse 4, and Jude,
What
1
chapter?
6.
What chapter in Second Peter?
It Second Peter 2:4, where it talks about the angels that weren't spared or
Mm-hmm.
something. Yeah, it was. I can read it real quick. For if God spare not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell and deliver them in the chains of darkness to be reserved into judgment. That verse and Jude, yeah, Jude 1, or I guess First Jude 6, and the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains into darkness, into the judgment of the great day. Um, wouldn't you say like those verses kind of support like the Book of Enoch and stuff? Because
Yeah.
yeah, I read this like before I was familiarized with the Enoch, Jubilees, and the other ones, and I'm like, okay, well, this is saying they're already locked up, but
Mm-hmm.
in Matthew, Jesus is casting out unclean spirits, and most churches, I was taught that they're
Mm-hmm.
just fallen angels too. I'm
Yeah.
like, this doesn't make any sense because it's
Yeah.
saying they're locked up.
Unfortunately, that is another misconception because we have a less books in our Bible collection than other believers have had in history. So yeah, other believers in history have had the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, which directly tell you and explain to you where those unclean spirits came from in the New Testament that Jesus was dealing with, and they were the disembodied spirits of the giants from before the flood that were still now unclean spirits after the flood. And Jubilees 10 kind of goes into a breakdown the same way with Jubilees 10, or excuse me, Jubilees 10, and also First Enoch chapter 10 through 15. That's your 6 chapters to really read over, and it'll give you the full story on this idea of where the unclean spirits came from. They were not fallen angels; they were the Nephilim that's mentioned in Genesis 6:1-4. They were the offspring of the rebellious angels that took wives and tried to have families of their own, which they were not appointed to do, which is what First Enoch 15 explains. So this is something that, yes, Second Peter 2 and Jude 1 here, they're referencing commonly understood idea that is expounded upon in books that they did have at their disposal. They did read as a part of their scriptural theology. They did have as the backdrop of history of humankind's interaction with the angelic kind, and part of the angels' sin. Basically, this is, and it's not all the angels. It was just 200 plus, right? Of what
Yeah.
I think is 201. So it's not a lot of them that rebelled, but and of course, Jubilees even tells you they were sent to the earth because they were trying to help mankind. And while they were here, some of them got tempted and deceived and took wives, and because they wanted children of their own. And then there was.
Well, that's the funny thing too, because you'll see these apologetics channels, and um, they made some, I forgot which ones, but yeah, they would like make videos about I guess rethinking how not the fall, but how like Lucifer fell and stuff like that. They'd be like, they would say like, oh well, he wasn't like really in heaven, because people were bringing up like, well, okay, if you're in heaven, you're in the presence of God, why would you want to sin? And some of them will backpedal and be like, oh well, no, maybe he wasn't in heaven, but I mean,
Yeah.
Jubilee says he wasn't, like they were here. So, I'm like, these other books kind of, yeah, like bring more context and make things make more sense, because it's like you kind of have things that, would appear to be a contradiction if you're trying to, if you're an atheist or try to disprove the Bible. But no, it's not.
There's some long-standing history. It's about 1,600-year-old attack, if you will, from a Christian perspective, from all the way back to the days of Augustine, where he just started to argue the idea that maybe it wasn't angels that showed up. Maybe it was the descendants of Seth that were being referred to as the sons of God in Genesis 6. So this is where this became a Catholic mantra that was then adopted by many Protestant belief systems and Protestant denominations that have carried that over into modern seminaries that do teach that. I've heard, incredibly high ranking, if you will, PhD scholared theologians from certain seminaries in the United States that do preach that, oh, there were no angels that took wives. That's a myth. It was just men that were being referred to as the sons of God that took wives. And I'm like, there's so much textually wrong with that. There's hermeneutically wrong. There's verses like you just presented. There is the testimony of First Enoch Jubilees as acknowledged by Jewish historians, even that those used to be books as a part of the Jewish scriptures before the first century AD. So there is a wealth of testimony, and I've done debates on the Book of Enoch. I've done full exposés on the Book of Jubilees with historical and textual critique and breakdown. So there's a lot of evidence. Unfortunately, brother, what we run into in our life is a lot of people that have been trained in one way of thinking, and they struggle to let go of that.
Yeah.
This is our battle, right? Is we have to, excuse me. So what I'm always doing, hopefully, I'm not sure how long you watch the channel, but what you always see me try to do is show people the word. Now, some people were going to buck, because they went to some Bible college, or they heard their favorite pastor say something different they were taught in seminary. They were taught, some contrary idea that's not in the word. They may buck, right? But in my opinion, this is our goal, we're going to sow that word into them, because they need to know the word first. They don't need to know my opinion. They don't need to know, because they're already running off somebody else's opinion. So what good is my opinion? I just want to show them the word. What I mean? And so they're going to have let the Spirit work on their heart with accepting what the word says, so they can have a better understanding of the story itself. And so a lot of people have really struggled with the verses you've brought up, because they also refuse to believe other parts of Genesis that relates to the story of where the angels even came from, which is the biblical creation model.
Yeah.
The description of where angels actually exist and live, which is above us in layers of the firmament. So they really struggle with that idea. And so there's some Christian denominations that they don't believe angels interact hardly at all. They think that, they really struggle with the idea. So it is a challenge, but we just try to
I'll say one last thing, but yeah, I'm still trying to wrap my head around the creation model. That's probably like one of the hardest things. I mean, Genesis 6, that was kind of easy for me to accept. That was, you put the pieces, make sense. But yeah, the creation model, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it's still hard for me to kind of, what I mean? Because it's like, I was never taught that, so it's like,
how
I'm still
old are you, Isaiah?
22.
22? Okay.
Yep.
So that means for 22 years, you've been told a different model.
Yeah.
So, and you're continually being told a different model every day. It's infused into so many different things in our lives. Logos, branding, company logos, shirts, movies, images,
sci-fi movies.
Just the actual wording of things, how people say stuff. It's infused in everything. So it takes time to start thinking along the lines of what the Bible actually describes and testing that compared to just what we've been taught all our life. So keep at it, brother. And because if you do, we've got our creation playlist on the channel here. Hopefully that'll help you. Also go over to Hanging on His Words. Our brother Ken Heidebrecht, his channel, he has some great informational videos about the firmament, which is the creation model. And so that may help you. He's got great visuals to go along with it as well to kind of give you a better perspective of how this.
Yeah, I'm a visual guy, I guess.
Yeah. You may really like that as well. So he gives you a good breakdown with visuals, and the visuals are good, easy to understand. So check that out if you have a chance.
Yeah, but anyways, I'll let you go. I love to come back. I enjoyed talking and stuff.
Yeah.
All right, see you,
brother. Thanks for calling. All right, guys. Let's pick up here in Exodus 14, 1-5 says, the Lord spoke to Moses, and he's saying, speak to the children of Israel that they turn and encamp before Pihahiroth. I don't think I said that right. I don't even know how to say that, to be honest. It's very, very difficult. Pihahiroth. It kind of sounds like you're just tripping over your tongue. Pihahiroth. Between Migdol and the sea, over against Baal-Zephon. Before it, you shall camp by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, they are entangled in the land, the wilderness to shut them in, and I will harden Pharaoh's heart that he shall follow after them, and I will be honored upon Pharaoh and upon all his hosts, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. And they did so. And it was told the king of Egypt that the people fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and of his servants was turned against the people, and they said, why have we done this, that we have let Israel go from serving us? 6 through 10 says, and he made ready his chariot and took his people with him. And he took 600 chosen chariots and all the chariots of Egypt and captains over every one of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. He pursued after the children of Israel, and the children of Israel went out with a high hand. But the Egyptians pursued after them, all the horses and the chariots of Pharaoh and the horsemen and his army, and overtook them encamping by the sea, besides Pihahirot before Baal-zephon. And when Pharaoh drew close, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them, and they were sore afraid. And the children of Israel cried unto the Lord. They said to Moses, because there are no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Wherefore have you dealt thus with us, to carry us forth out of Egypt? Guys, I got to stop real quick. If this verse 11 is hilarious. Because I've actually seen this in the last few months. Many of you guys know, excuse me, I'm sorry. My throat's like super itchy today. Many of you guys know that I've been working for the last year with some folks to help develop and design a new video social media marketplace, right? It's called Lighthouse. It takes the best of YouTube, Facebook, and Etsy, like online sellers like eBay and Etsy, and it puts it into one easy to use platform. Many of you guys have seen this. It's called Lighthouse. We were about to launch, but then all this stuff happened with all the censorship. So now we're having to find new server hosting and email hosting because we don't want to be in the position that Parler was in. Okay, because the people that were doing this, they never thought that Amazon would behave like the way Amazon is behaving. So they're having to readjust. It's taking some extra time, unfortunately. But that's going to be coming out any day now, real close. So as I've been talking about this for the last few months and explaining it to people, you don't know how many times I have people, just like in verse 11, like we're reading here, where you've literally got something that's going to help them step away from oppression. And you've gone through all this effort to bring it to them. Like, you guys have no clue how many late nights I've been up with people helping these consult on the design and functionality of Lighthouse over the last 13 months. Like, it's been a lot of work, right? So you go through all this, and there's a whole team of other people that are going through all this effort to bring this concept to people that can give them a sense of freedom where they're currently being oppressed. And as you introduce it to people, there are people that have actually called me, and I'm not going to say who, but they've called me and they say, well, what if this is just like, they're talking to me. I literally I've been part of the functionality design for this thing. And they're talking to me and they're saying, what if this is just like a scam to get a bunch of people isolated, into a certain area just so you can trap them all. And because you just know who they all are. And I'm like, wait a minute. First of all, they already know who all of you are. If you've ever used any of the social medias, they're all tracking you anyway. Lighthouse isn't going to track you. So there's a huge difference right there. You're worried, you're paranoid and worried about something that's already happening to you. And you're worried about that happening to you on another platform that is not designed to do that to you. It is the mentality of paranoia suspicion that abandons critical reasoning and thinking. This is what's happening with the Israelites. Talking to Moses like this. Moses has gone through all this effort. The Father has used Moses with this amazing show of miracles over a course of many months to bring them out of Egypt. And now they're out of Egypt. And the people are looking at Moses with suspicion that it's a conspiracy. Like, they're looking at Moses going, oh, so you brought us out here to die, huh? You didn't think we could just die in Egypt? You took us out here to die? Like, think about the utter ridiculous paranoid suspicion and just overall disrespect to Moses' effort to these people at this point. But just the idea that, like, they're so beat down in their brain to not be able to believe that something good can happen, that they are in the midst of something good happening and they're still claiming that it's bad. Think about that mindset of just utter oppression. This is the mindset that I see and I've dealt with in the last 3-4 months as well. People that are just beat down. They don't even know what expecting good looks like anymore. They could be in the midst of it, literally walking into something good, and still look around and go, man, this is just our grave, isn't it? Is this our grave? Think about what we're looking at here, guys. Exodus 14:11. The pillar of cloud. There's literally an angel. We're going to talk about that after this chapter and the next chapter. There's literally an angel in this pillar of cloud, chilling, floating in the air between Israel and the Egyptians, everyone's staring at it. All the 2+ million Israelites are staring at it. The million+ army of Egyptians are staring at it. They're staring at this amazing spectacle of this pillar of cloud that, by day, fire by night, that's an angel inside of it. And the Israelites are still thinking that this has just been a big trick for God to bring them out to their death out here. Guys, this is how far the mind will go to reject something good. How the emotional immaturity of people to get their hopes up for something, and they can't handle their hopes being dashed. So they would rather believe everything is against them and there's never a chance for goodness in their life. It's just an emotional immaturity if you really break it down, but it is a spirit of oppression in the heart and the mind of the Israelites. And Moses continues to deal with the same spirit multiple times in the following chapters and even books. This is why we have Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 2, where Yahweh explains to Moses that he brought the children of Israel out to the wilderness to test them, to see if it's in their heart to do his commandments. He's going to mention that as well in chapter 16, so I'm going to keep going. All right, guys. So here he goes on in verse 12. He says, "Is this not the word what we did tell you in Egypt, saying, 'Let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians'? For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness." And Moses said to the people, "Fear not, stand still. See the salvation of the Lord, which he shall show you today. For the Egyptians whom you have seen today, you shall see them again no more forever." I don't know if you guys, to me, this strikes a recollection in verse 13, where Moses has to calm them, and he says, "Fear not, stand still." This is very similar to what we read in the Masoretic in Genesis 4, verse 7, where Yahweh tells Cain, "Be still. It's okay if you sin. Well, sin's crouching at your door, but if you do well, will not go well with you. Your countenance will be lifted up." So he's having and also in you compare Genesis 4:7 and the Septuagint as well. It tries to re-encourage Cain that he says, "Be still. You will rule over him," because Cain was supposed to be the firstborn and the ruler over Abel, but he relinquished that honor by his behavior, right? And so that's this is that same mentality that Moses is trying to tell these rebellious Israelites, these fearful and worrisome, oppressed Israelites. He's trying to be like, "Look, just be still, relax. It's okay. Just just calm down. See the salvation of the Lord." They're staring at it in a cloud hovering above them. It's amazing. It makes you wonder how much magic they had seen in Egypt to not be to not be in total enamor and awe at this floating angel just hanging out around them. How much crazy magic did they see in Egypt? And this is what I think we're going to see before Yeshua returns, is the return of Babylonian magic, which is what we're told in Isaiah 47 and 18 and Revelation 18. All right, so it says, verse 14, "The Lord shall fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. And the Lord said to Moses, Why do you cry unto me? Speak unto the children of Israel, that they go forward." And 16 through 20 says, "But lift up your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. The children of Israel shall go on dry land through the midst of the sea. And behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians and shall follow them, and they shall follow them. And I will get me honor upon Pharaoh and upon all his hosts, upon his chariots and upon his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gotten me honor upon Pharaoh, upon his horse, upon his chariots, and upon his horsemen. And the angel of God, which went before the camp of Israel, removed and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud went from before their face and stood behind them. And it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of the Israel, and it was a cloud and darkness to them, but it gave light by night to these, so that the one came not near the other all the night." So basically, he's this angel, and this is why I highlighted this passage for everyone to see. This angel is, like I just said, it's something that everyone can see, and he's in this pillar of cloud. And now as it becomes nighttime, he becomes a brightness to the Israelites, but he's just darkness from the other side that the Egyptians can see. And they can see him. This is an angel of God, guys. The pillar, there was an angel of God. This is not Yeshua. Yeshua's not here. This is an actual angel of the presence. The guy that's narrating the book of Jubilees to Moses on Mount Sinai, this is the dude, the angel of God, the angel of the presence. This is the guy we see later talking with Moses on Mount Sinai and narrating the book of Jubilees to him, as Jubilees chapter 1 and 2 expounds. This is a character in the story that people overlook, and they want to insert Yeshua in here when it's not Yeshua at all. It's never told to us as Yeshua. Nowhere in any of the writings was it ever supposed that the Son of God, the Hebrews didn't think like this. They understood Jubilees. They understood the book of Enoch. They understood the prophecy of the Son of God and when he was supposed to come. He didn't show up as the king of Melchizedek and ruling of an earthly kingdom for a long time. And that's not the same. There's so much speculation about you just trying to put Yeshua everywhere into the scriptures, when the scriptures tell us there was an appointed time for him to show up on the earth as a man. And no, he's not just showing up willy-nilly everywhere. He's got servants to do that for him. Yeshua, the Son of God, is the King of heaven, as he tells us in John 19:38. He has servants. He doesn't have to go out and do the light work. Guys, what we're seeing here with this angel of the presence, that's light work. He doesn't have to do that. He's the king. He has servants that goes out and does his business for him. This is how things get accomplished in a kingdom, okay? So this very powerful angel that's going with Israel, he's a servant of the Most High God, just as Hebrews 1:14 tells us. They're sent out to mankind to minister unto those who are inheriting salvation. So this is why this angel of God is here, and he's doing this, and he's hanging out with them this whole time. And he's going to speak in the next few chapters as well. So it's very interesting, guys. It's very interesting. Verse 21 through 25. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry land. The waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went in after them to the midst of the sea, even all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. It came to pass that in the morning watch, the Lord looked upon the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and of the cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians, and took off their chariot wheels, and that drove them heavily, so that the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. So real quick, guys, this passage in 24 and 25, I didn't highlight it, but I should have. It is, to me, like I have this mindset when I read scripture, I start seeing like a movie happening, right? So this moment here, imagine it's darkness, it's pitch dark, you got a wall of water on either side of you. It's the most fantastical thing you've ever seen in your whole life, and you're chasing after these Israelites who've already made it through this dry passage. And there's a million of them, as we're going to read in the book of Jubilees. There's approximately 1 million of the armies of Pharaoh, and they're going through this dry land with water on both sides of them in the darkness of night. That's creepy, for one, right? The whole thing is creepy because the thing that they fear is about to happen, which is the water comes back in on them. And at this point in the morning watch, which is approximately 4 or 5 in the morning, according to everything I've read, you suddenly see you're walking through this pathway, if you will, where there's water on both sides of you in this darkness. And suddenly you see this thing that you saw earlier that kept you away from the Israelites the day before, or earlier the night before, this angel in the cloud. And suddenly you see him. It says, the Lord looked unto the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire. Guys, this is the common agency language of scripture that's everywhere in scripture when angels are involved. They're servants of the Lord. So whenever they do something, it's credited that the Lord's doing it because they're there doing what God told them to do. So this is why this language is like that. It's just agency language. This is a very common idea in life about how the person who sent the agent gets the credit for what's happening. Okay, so this is why it says the Lord looked unto the host of the Egyptians, that's the armies of the Egyptians, through the pillar of fire and of the cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians. They can see this dude. Imagine this scene. Darkness, mistiness, shoots of water spray hitting you occasionally probably. But yet you're still walking in this fantastical dry path with 2 walls of water just magically, crazily, miraculously hanging on both sides of you without coming together again. And then suddenly you see this thing. And you stand there looking at you from the air. And you're terrified. And by the way, verse 25, it says he took off their chariot wheels. This is the KJV version. It says various translations will say different things as far as how he troubled their chariots. I think the Septuagint says that he took the axles, the wooden axles, and made them and messed them up somehow, basically. So he basically messed with their wheels. It doesn't not all translations say he took off their chariot wheels. Some say it just made it very difficult, or like locked them up, if you will. Either way, they couldn't travel as fast as they could have. So they couldn't retreat as fast as they were pursuing, is the point. He messed with their vehicles. So this is why they're now entrapped in this large span area where they're trying to cross over the sea. And so this is what we're going to read in the next passage as it comes together on them. Verse 26, the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea, and the waters may come again upon the Egyptians and upon their chariots and on their horsemen. Then Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its strength when the morning appeared. And the Egyptians fled against it, and the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, and all the armies of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. There remained not so much as one of them. But the children of Israel walked upon dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. And Israel saw that great work which the Lord did upon the Egyptians. And the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. All right. Interesting, huh, guys? Thank you. Scott is not from here. Appreciate you, brother. Thanks for the super chat. Fascinating, right? So we've heard this story before. Many movies have been made about it. Very rarely do people highlight the angel of the presence, this angel that is with them in this cloud with me. He's a character in the story. We're not given his technical name like we are Moses and Aaron, but he's there the whole time. And as we get into some following chapters, we're going to see him actually start talking. It's a tragedy and a shame because so many people want to gloss over, like you heard me talking with the caller earlier with Isaiah, but they want to gloss over the idea of angels in scripture because they can't understand it. Because the angels make a specific claim on where they come from. People don't want to understand where they come from according to scripture or the capacity of what they can do. So this is why you have so much what's called Christology. You have so much insertions of Jesus everywhere in the Old Testament trying to make sense of things that the Bible already explains itself if we just take the words for what they say. This angel who's sent there is a part of this process. He's the one that's doing the technical details after Moses raises his rod and intends for a command to be done. Then the angel does the physical miraculous moving of the earth to make that happen. That's the angel has been given this type of power, and all the credit goes to the Father. He always gets the credit, guys. He's the one who empowered the angel to do this. So, for example, let me pull this up real quick. I didn't have this planned, so give me just 2 seconds, and I'm gonna see if I can find this real quick and pull this up, because this is actually in the book of Sirach. I think it's chapter 5, and this is what we're talking about. It explains the power of these angels to be able to do this. See if I can find it real quick. And this is also what we see Yeshua having the power to do. I can pull this up just real quick if I can find it. Yeah. Okay. Nope, that's not it. Where did I put this? Where did I put this? All right, guys, 1 second. But I can find this real quick. I got a lot of different files, a lot of different memes and images, scriptural memes, that kind of stuff. Oh, here it is. Okay. All right, so let's pull this over here. See if you guys can see it. So this is it's not from, I was wrong. It's not from the Sirach. It's the Wisdom of Solomon. Chapter 16:24. For creation serving you who has made it exerts itself to punish the unrighteous, and in kindness it relaxes on behalf of those who trust in you. So think about this. And I paralleled it with Mark 4, where Yeshua, rebukes the storm. So he shows mastery over the water, just like the angel's doing in this moment here in Exodus, showing mastery over the water, being able to split it, being able to make it come back at any point. This is why, we're in John 10, Yeshua promises, there will be a time when we can do the things that Yeshua did and greater. If he'll say, throw this mountain in the sea, it'll happen. The creation will bend to the will. Hopefully you'll be walking in the will of the Father. You're not walking in your own will, but you're walking in the will of the Father. And if that, and the Father has sent you to do something as a glorified, resurrected saint who's a part of his priesthood to go out and minister unto the world outside the New Jerusalem, and you need to rearrange the earth to help them establish something because something was messed up from before, from all the carnage of the beastly system and the cataclysm of them trying to destroy the earth, as Revelation 11 talks about, then you may have to go out and fix part of the earth at some point. And that's going to be available to you through the spirit of power flowing through you as you've been put in this honored position as a resurrected saint. So the angels are already in that honored position as an angel of the presence, as an angel of God to go out and minister unto the people and have the spirit of God flow through them, that as Wisdom of Solomon 16:24 tries to expound to us, for the creation serving Yahweh, that's the you being referenced to, the pronoun, serving Yahweh who has made it, exerts itself to punish the unrighteous, which is what we see happening here with the story of Pharaoh's armies being drowned by the Red Sea. And likewise, it relaxes on behalf of those who trust in you. So this is why Yeshua walked around, who was perfectly trusting the Father, walking in the will of the Father, perfectly doing the commandments of God, and he could just do whatever he wanted. He could take dirt and make a new eyeball. He could walk on the waters. He could calm the storms if he wanted to. So this is an amazing concept, how, in Genesis in day 6, when the Father has completed creation and he's making mankind, and he then subjugates all of creation underneath mankind as far as where we live under this part of the firmament, that was a big deal. So if Adam would have continued to walk in the Spirit of God, which is in obedience, he would have had mastery over all the creation, not just dominion over the animals. It's a big deal, guys. This is what we get to return to when Yeshua resurrects us. It's going to be an amazing time. Yeah, Hannibal, it's hilarious how he understood these things so well. He could just be asleep and everyone else is freaking out. He's just asleep. And yes, and it is going to be an amazing gift. An amazing gift. Gabby and Grafted, she says, I could not imagine angels having homes and going back and forth to work in the kingdom. Yeah, isn't that crazy? We really struggle with this because we've been taught so little on what the scriptures tell us about angels. But I think it's First Enoch chapter 42. Enoch sees the actual homes of the angels as he's getting this tour of the heavenly realms. So it's, they have homes. Like we read Zechariah 2 and Isaiah 4. I mean, there will be actual animals. There's already animals up there. In fact, Jubilees 6 tells us that they're keeping the feasts up there, which means you have to have animals to bring forth for your first fruit offerings, for your tithe offerings, for your, you see what I'm saying, your Thanksgiving offerings. Not all offerings having to do with sin. So there's all these other offerings that require animals that you bring forward to make a fellowship meal with the Father. The angels have been doing that since creation started. That's what Jubilees tells us. So it's very, very interesting perspective to understand how the angels have a real existence. They're real people. They're real entities. Maybe not call them people, but they're real beings. They really exist and they really interact. They look very much like us if they want to. And their whole intended purpose was to be ministers to us. They're the first priesthood that was ever created. So it's sad how little we're taught on the reality of our heavenly brethren who serve the Father with us. So it's sad. So here we have this one particular angel that's being highlighted in this story, and he's still around in Leviticus 9. That's why I have this on screen. He's still here. He's still doing his thing. So we see in Leviticus 9:22-24, then Aaron lifted up his hands toward the people and blessed them. And he stepped down after making the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offerings. And Moses and Aaron went into the tent of meeting. When they came out and blessed the people, the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people. Who's that? Is this actually Yahweh? Is this the Father? No, we know it's not. He tells us he doesn't do this. He only showed Moses his backside, but he doesn't actually appear to all the people. It's the angel of the presence. It's the same one they're talking to face in the tent of meeting that they just went into. This is exactly what we're told in Exodus 33. It's the angel of God that's been with them as the representative mouthpiece, the agent, the go-between, the liaison, whatever word you want to get it. He's the one that's been nominated to go speak on behalf of the Father to Moses and Aaron this whole time. Okay, so it says, verse 24, the fire went out from the Lord, that's from the angel of the presence that's there with them, and consumed the burnt offering and the portions of the fat on the altar. And when all the people saw it, they shouted and fell face downward. How interesting. This is a beautiful moment here, guys, because we see this happen also in the day of Gideon. We see it happen with Samson. We see it happen in 1 Kings chapter 18 with Elijah on Mount Carmel. We also see it happen in 1 Kings chapter 8 with Solomon dedicating the temple. This is very unique that these angels of the presence, they can light the sacrifice on behalf of the Father to create this fire. They're not accepting, they're just a conduit, right? So the Father's being glorified on behalf of the sacrifice that's being made, and he's honoring it by acknowledging. That's why it gives credit to the Father. It says the fire went out from the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the portions of fat. It's just assumed the agency of this angel is here the whole time. The Lord's not actually standing there to light the sacrifice. It's this angel of the presence has been with him the whole time. Okay, guys? So hopefully just going to give you a little more understanding from the rest of some of the books surrounding the Torah and how this angel of the presence is around and involved in their affairs this whole time. He's their guardian. It says Exodus 23, as we're going to read later in subsequent weeks. This is what the Father tells him. I'm sending my angel before you to go with you, to help you, to do things, to guide you. Listen to him. Listen to him, right? So this is very important. All right. Cover to cover with Jeremy Pierce. He's asking a fun question. Can you explain Jude chapter 1, verse 5? Strong says Yahusha, he's claiming Jesus, led them out. All right, let's put it on screen. You guys realize that this is one verse before what Isaiah was asking about earlier, Jude 1:5. Now, I want to remind you that you know everything once and for all, that the Lord, after saving a people out of the land of Egypt, subsequently destroyed those who did not believe. So, Jeremy, what have I just been talking about with the idea of agency? So, you remember, I'm guessing you didn't just show up. You've probably been watching this for a while today. I know you've been watching the channel for a while, but you probably didn't just show up to the broadcast in the last 2 minutes. So you probably already heard me explaining the idea of agency, as well as the idea of how Jesus, Yahushua Mashiach, is the King of heaven before he becomes incarnate through the womb of Mary. So what does he do? He has servants that go out and do his work. Who gets the credit? Who gets the credit? This is the Hebrew mindset of Jude. He understands what Jesus already acknowledged in John chapter 18:38. He's the King of heaven. He has a kingdom. He has angels at his disposal. He's given that kingdom by the Father, but he's still the King of heaven, and he's going to be the King of heaven and earth when he comes to rule and reign on the day of the Lord. So this is before his incarnation through the womb of Mary, before the mystery of godliness that's referred to in 1 Timothy 3:16, that he comes down and is manifest in the flesh. Before that, while he's still living in heaven as a spiritual being, he's the King of heaven, and he instructs things. And so let's run into this real quick. Try to explain to you why John would be saying this, or why Jude would be speaking like this. Check this out. Verse 1 of Revelation 1. The revelation of Jesus Christ, that's the information that's revealed to John of Jesus Christ, which God gave him. Who's the him? Jesus. God gave Jesus this information to show his bondservants, right? To show his disciples, and John is the one that gets to see this and then spread the word, the things which must soon take place, and he sent and communicated it by his angel to his bondservant John. This is agency happening right here. So this is information about Jesus Christ, which the Father gave to Jesus Christ, who then sent an angel to communicate this to John. See how beautiful that is? So therefore, John the Revelator can say, this is a message from Jesus. It's also a message from the Father. Remember what Jesus said in John 17? I think it's John 17:14. His doctrine's on his own. He teaches what the Father told him to say. It's always been like this because he's perfectly obedient. So even in the Old Testament, Yeshua is not making separate decisions as the King of Heaven than the Almighty above him. Yeshua just, okay, so think about it like in a mindset of ancient kingdoms, okay? You would have an emperor who is over kings, but then there would be kings underneath that emperor who would be over other kings. But the emperor is over all of it, okay? So metaphorically, if you allow me to use this metaphor, the Father God, the Almighty, is the supreme chancellor. He's the emperor. And then his son is the king of heaven and earth, is the king of all kings, Lord of lords, king of kings, ruler of rulers, okay? That position was given to him by the Father. This is why Yeshua says, all authority, Matthew 11, all authority in heaven and the earth has been given to me by my Father. It's this dichotomy, this stair-step hierarchy that's given from the heavenly kingdom. From the Almighty it starts, and then all of it goes down. So all the information, all the instructions to the angels starts from the Father, and it can be communicated by the Son to the angels to go do. Who's going to get the credit? Father and Son. Whoever you want to give the credit to, it doesn't matter. They're both making the same decisions. They're both given the same commands. So yes, Jude 1:5 is correct. If Strong's is accurately communicating the Greek word kurios, we'll say it is. I don't even want to contest that. It doesn't even matter, because I understand how agency works. And this is what the Bible explains to us about the purpose and the role of Messiah. And this is what Messiah explains to us about who he was before he became incarnate. So of course, yeah, Yeshua could easily get the credit. In fact, guys, there's something that I haven't talked about a lot on my channel that I'll be discussing in a special series of videos where I'm going to go through certain passages in the Old Testament and show you where Yeshua is making commands before he's incarnate, because he's the King of Heaven. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating. This is why the proverb in Proverbs 30 verse 4, the sarcastic rhetorical passage where the person who wrote the proverb would be asking, can you tell me the name of the Son? Because it hadn't been revealed yet, but they all knew he was alive and existed. They all knew, because they had read Enoch, and in 1 Enoch 46 and 48, it talks about this one that was nominated before the sun, moon, and stars were created. This son that goes before with the Father, this son of the man character that goes before with the Father, that's higher than all the other angels. He's given the authority. He's given the name above all names. He's nominated, and in him all the Gentiles will trust. This has already been, from the very beginning, from the days of Enoch, it's already been prophesied. So all the patriarchs of old knew there was always an intended Son of the Most High who was above all the angels that was going to be coming to the earth. That was part of the storyline. So that's why you would have passages like Proverbs 30 verse 4. And that's why we're going to see stuff in Isaiah and other places where it looks like the Son is talking. So we've just been so discombobulated in our understanding of the pre-incarnate Yeshua because of Trinitarian doctrines. And so hopefully, brother, that's an answer for you that will help you with that and lead you out of any confusion, if you will. Okay, it looks like you said you do. I think I communicated that semi well. Melissa is asking a fun question. She's asking, do angels have sin offering, or what happens if they sin? Yeah, what happens if they sin? Think about what we see with the rebellious angels of God who came and took wives during the days of Jared and Enoch. And a long span of time went by before they were punished for that. God is extremely merciful. He doesn't wish that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance and be saved. So this is why they're a part of the law. They understand the law. They understand that sin offerings can be made. There's tabernacles in heaven that they can do these things. There's the ultimate tabernacle at the highest level of heaven, on the seventh level of the firmament. This is where Yeshua ministers on our behalf. That's what Hebrews 8 refers to. So yes, they bring their Thanksgiving offerings. They bring their first fruit offerings. They bring their tithe offerings. Why? Because they have home and land and animals, and they live in a real place. So if they mess up, we're told in the promise of the covenant, Enoch chapter 5, verse 6 through 9, and Jeremiah 31, Jeremiah 33, say this right, Jeremiah 31, verses 33 and 34, at the resurrection. It's also in Ezekiel 37. I think it's verses 17 through 24. And also in Ezekiel 36, it's everywhere, guys. At the resurrection, you and I, as human mortals, were made higher than the angels, and we will not be able to sin. That's never promised to angels. But the good news is the Father's law allows for you to have atonement. So mankind, when we atone, right, we were always, I just put out our video recently this past week. Go check it out. It's called Mortality in 2 minutes or Less. And I go over all the scriptures that explain the condition of mankind, how we're recreated, and why the first death, which is the death of our body, was guaranteed always from the start. This is why they had to be near the tree of life and eat the fruit of the tree of life in order to keep living. But now that we don't have that, it's always been guaranteed. But that's not been guaranteed. That's not the circumstances that's described for angels. Chapter 15 says they were created immortal to live in the heavenlies and in the layers of the firmament above us. That was always their intended purpose. But they were not created without the ability to sin. They can still sin. So therefore, the Father provided a way for their sin to be atoned for and for that relationship to be restored again. And it's through the administration of the priesthood from the angels themselves. But now Yeshua himself is over all the other angels in heaven above as far as his priesthood. So he can make atonement for anyone he wants, as long as they're doing the behavior of the covenant, and which means they have to come to repentance if they do make a mistake. Now, with that said, we do see angels that have sinned. Do all the angels in heaven currently sin all the time? I highly doubt it, because they're literally around people that are doing the law all the time, and they've got it down. It's been thousands of years. They got it down. You know what I'm saying? I highly doubt they're just constantly sinning. It's very different on the earth, right? We're away from the physical manifestation, temple presence of God like they have in heaven. It's a totally different environment. We have little knowledge. We see in part, we know in part, like Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians. We struggle. We have to remind our brain constantly to wash ourselves with the water of the word, of his instructions. No, they don't have to do that. They're much more intelligent. They have his law, more accessible. They have better memories than us. They're created immortal already. It's very much more difficult for them to sin, but it's not impossible for them to sin. I'm going to stop elaborating on that. Hopefully that's a thorough answer for you. I have quite a few more pieces of portion to get back to. So, but it's a great question. Okay, guys. So let's go into Jubilees chapter 48 real quick. This is our companion passage, what we just read in Exodus 14. And it says, and we're going to just review a couple verses that explain about how Yahweh hardened the heart of Pharaoh, because it actually goes into explaining this moment to help you understand what the war that happens in the spiritual realm and how technically it happens. When we get this general overview of like, oh, he hardened Pharaoh's heart and Yahweh hardened Pharaoh's heart, and then Pharaoh went after the Israelites. Well, that's a very general overview. Now, if you want some of the technical information, like behind the scenes, actually what's going on in the spiritual realm, this is where Jubilees expounds on this. Jubilees 48, 12 through 14 says, and notwithstanding all these signs and wonders, the prince Mastema, that's the Satan character, was not put to shame, because he took courage and cried to the Egyptians to pursue after you with all the powers of the Egyptians. Guys, this is the angel of the presence that we just talked about. He's talking to Moses, and he on Mount Sinai during the 40 days and 40 nights he was up there, and he's kind of rehashing some of the events from his perspective, from the angelic perspective. So he says, and he cried to the Egyptians, Mastema cried to the Egyptians to pursue after you, that's Moses, with all the powers of the Egyptians, and with their chariots, and with their horse, and with all the hosts of the peoples of Egypt. And I stood between the Egyptians and Israel, and we delivered Israel out of his hand, and out of the hand of his people. And the Lord brought them through the midst of the sea as if it were dry land. So this is the angel declaring directly he was involved in this. And he's the one telling you, I was this guy. This is me. You're talking to him. And all the peoples whom he brought to pursue after Israel, the Lord our God cast them in the midst of the sea, into the depths of the abyss, beneath the children of Israel, even as the people of Egypt had cast out children into the river. He took vengeance on 1,000,000 of them, and 1,000 strong and energetic men were destroyed on account of one suckling of the children of which your people, which they had thrown into the river. So he's basically saying it's a 1,000 to 1 ratio. They already had judgment coming. I'm going to go into the spiritual aspect in a few more verses, okay? So stay with us. He's explaining further that this is a ratio of 1,000 to 1. For every one person they threw in the river of your children, I got 1,000 of their military that I killed. So this is a strong judgment against them. And then he goes in verse 15 through 19 to say, and on the 14th day, on the 15th and the 16th, and on the 17th and the 18th, Prince Mastema was bound and imprisoned behind the children of Israel that he might not accuse them. And on the 19th, we let them loose that they might help the Egyptians and pursue the children of Israel. Remember what we read back in Exodus 12? What was all this happening? It wasn't just on the rebellious people of Egypt that were treating the Israelites harshly. They had, as a people, as a culture, they had turned against the Hebrews and were oppressing them. Not just the rulers, but the people themselves. Also, the judgments of Egypt was against the gods of Egypt, the unclean spirits that were fooling, deceiving, and allowing the, what's the word? Making possible the sorcery and the magician's power and the sorcery that we see Egypt using. The unclean spirits are making that possible. So as a result, those quote-unquote little g gods are being judged too. This is what the text tells us in Exodus 12. That's what's being referred to here as this Mastema and the spirits with him. This is what you have to go back to Jubilees 10 to understand why it's mentioning it that way. That they are let loose so that they might help the Egyptians and pursue the children of Israel. And he hardened their hearts and made them stubborn. And the device was devised by the Lord our God that he might smite the Egyptians and cast them into the sea. So guys, think about what we just read here between verses 15 through 17. There's a process that's happening here, okay? These Mastema and his unclean spirits are bound. When they're let go, it says they let loose that they might help the Egyptians to pursue the children of Israel. What we read in the previous verse, verse 12, notwithstanding all these signs and wonders, the prince Mastema was not put to shame because he took courage. He cried to the Egyptians to pursue after the Israelites with all the powers of the Egyptians. This is what this breakdown is trying to explain to you, that the terminology of the Lord hardening Pharaoh's heart, which was, it says in verse 17, is a device that was devised by the Lord our God. He's using the behavior of the unclean spirits and what they always do, predictable behavior. He binds them for a minute to let something happen, to let the Egyptians can not be deceived and to think logically, yeah, we should let these people go. But then he releases the unclean spirits. They go in, they do what they always do. They go after the emotionally spiritual vulnerable and they deceive them into making a really bad decision. So it's not like the Lord himself goes into the heart of Pharaoh and makes him stubborn. No, he's just using the things that are in play. This is why it's called a device that's devised by the Lord God. He's using the things that are in play already, knowing their predictable behavior, to orchestrate a specific judgment. So this is just a chess game that we're seeing here. He just knows how to use the different players involved. Because the Egyptians, and this is something that I think people really gloss over, especially people that are agnostic or atheist, and they really hate the story. They completely absolve the Egyptians of any guilt in this story, because usually they don't read the Bible. They just cherry pluck verses to hate the Bible. But what we've read so far up to chapter 15 is an entire storyline, all the way back to the latter part of Genesis as well, from the days of Joseph. Was the Egyptian people who were living in peace with the Hebrews turned on them and started hating them, started despising the Hebrews and oppressing them to the point where they thought it justified to kill their babies and to enslave them in physical labor. But for some reason, that's just glossed over by atheists. Right? When they say, well, why would God do this to them? You're like, bro, like, you don't believe that people should be held accountable for their actions? Here's God holding them accountable for their actions, but now he's wrong for doing that. So it's this weird, very biased mentality of like, oh, only God's the bad guy in this for some reason. It's so strange. It's not critical reasoning to what's actually being said in the story. So it's really sad to see that happen. Verse 18, on the 14th, we bound them on a mountain and accused the children of Israel on the day that they asked the Egyptians for vessels and garments, vessels of silver, vessels of gold, vessels of bronze, in order to despoil the Egyptians and return for the bondage in which they had forced to serve them. And we did not lead forth the children of Israel from Egypt empty-handed. This is what is referred to, what we read in Exodus, where it says that the children of Israel left high-handed. That was that terminology that it's trying to explain to you, is that they had asked all the Egyptians, hey, would you please give us your silver and gold? They just literally were told to go ask them. And the Egyptians did. They said, yeah, here, take it, go. So this is a situation where they're going to use all that silver and gold, not to have wealth, because they're just going to go into the desert anyway. They're going to use it to build practical things that they need. Okay, so this wasn't just wasn't for the sake of having the bragging rights of saying we despoiled the Egyptians or we left with plunder. It's not about that. That's the terminology of leaving with great wealth. They call it being despoiled, or taking when there's a wealth transfer, they call it being despoiled. When you're leaving with great wealth, it's called plundering something, but it doesn't mean that it was done in a situation of violence. They literally just went up to them and asked, would you please give us the stuff? And the Egyptians were like, please, yes, take it and go. So this is explaining the spiritual stuff behind the scenes, how these unclean spirits that were affecting the mindset of the Egyptian people, not just the rulers, but the people themselves. This is why they're complicit in all this, and why they got judged just as severely as the rulers and the army. The people themselves, everything in Egypt, the military, the rulers, the gods, and the average person were all against the Israelites. They were all hating on them and all wanting them to be doomed and died after they oppressed them in slavery all their life. So this was a nationwide attack on the descendants of Joseph, or descendants of Jacob. And they're getting judged for their behavior. That's all it boils down to, man. So that's behind the scenes. Let's real quick, we'll go through a few verses here in Wisdom of Solomon 19 that's going to give us some extra fun information about what happens here at this same time period as well. So in the Wisdom of Solomon 19, 1-5, it says, but the ungodly were assailed to the end by pitiless anger, for God knew in advance even their future actions, that though they themselves had permitted your people to depart, and they hastily sent them forth, they would change their minds and pursue them. For while they were still busy at mourning, and were lamenting at the graves of their dead, they reached another foolish decision, and pursued as fugitives those whom they had begged and compelled to depart. For the fate they deserved drew them on to this end, and made them forget what had happened, in order that they might fill up the punishment which their torments still lacked, and that your people might experience an incredible journey, but they themselves might meet a strange death. They themselves, being the Egyptians, might meet a strange death. 6-9 says, for the whole creation in its nature was fashioned anew, complying with your commands, that your children might be kept unharmed. This is the parting of the Red Sea. This is what we just reviewed from the earlier Wisdom of Solomon chapter 17, talking about the creation relaxing itself on behalf of the righteous, basically becoming malleable to the righteous. That's the way it was designed from the beginning, but the creation can be used to go against the unrighteous. This is the way it's always been designed. Your behavior directly correlates to this place where we're created to live. The cloud was seen overshadowing the camp, and dry land emerged where water had stood before, an unhindered way out of the Red Sea, and a grassy plain out of the raging waves, where those protected by your hand passed through as one nation, after gazing on marvelous wonders, for they ranged like horses and leaped like lambs, praising you, O Lord, who did deliver them. How beautiful, guys. How beautiful is that? This even claims there's the dry path that was created between the waters even apparently had grass in the bottom, which is not uncommon. You would have some sort of, grass at the bottom of the sea growing on the sea floor. Very interesting stuff, guys. Exodus 15. I'm going to keep going real quick. Then sang Moses and the children of Israel this song unto the Lord, and he spoke, and he said, I will sing unto the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and its rider has he thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and song, and he has become my salvation. He is my God. I will prepare him a habitation. My father's God, I will exalt him. What's this? My father's God? Moses says, what? I thought this was the first time the Israelites were coming into covenant with God. How could Yahweh, the Lord, who's Moses' strength, who just brought them through this, be his father's God also? I thought, wait a minute, I thought Moses was raised as an Egyptian. That's what we've been told all our life by mainstream church. Wait, how could his father already have been serving Yahweh if this was the first time they were going into covenant? just like we're going to read in the next chapter, there's so much evidence before we get to Mount Sinai that these people already had the Torah. They already had the law and the instructions, the commandments of God. They were already in covenant. This is literally why they're being saved. They're descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The promise made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and was prophesied in Genesis to Abraham. Your people, your descendants, will go into the land and be oppressed by them, but then I will judge and bring them out of that land. They've been in covenant the whole time. He's going to renew the covenant with them once they get to Mount Sinai in a couple months. He's going to renew and make sure they know. He wants to remind them. They're already being taught it by and being judged by it in a few chapters here in Exodus 18. We'll talk about that next week. All of them, they literally, they're in this moment. I hope to hopefully recalibrate your understanding of the context of what's happening in this moment. They're coming out of Egypt with the bones of Joseph and with the books of their fathers, the books of Levi. That is, Jubilees 44 tells us that Levi had with him, which is the books of Enoch and the books of Shem and the books of Noah, the books of Abraham and Jacob. And Jubilees 32, where Jacob got these tablets from heaven that explains what's going to happen to him and his children throughout all the end of the ages. All these books of prophecy and instruction about how to do sacrifices, how to walk in love with your brethren, Jubilees 7:20, how to not eat blood, right? Don't do the pagan rituals. How to love your neighbor as yourself. Jubilees 7:20. How to all these instructions that are eternal, that never go away. They don't change. There's not an arbitrary standard that suddenly just popped up at Mount Sinai. This is stuff that's been carried down through all of patriarchal Israel since Adam. It is God who created mankind. He said, this is how you behave. This is how you interact with creation. This is how you interact with me. This is how you behave. This is my law. This is my instruction. That's been the same since day one. It's never changed. Do not fall victim, if you will, to bad teachings and modern misunderstandings of mainstream church. Teaching this supersessionism, dispensational theology of, oh, well, they didn't have the law before then. They just had it here at Mount Sinai. Guys, that Protestant doctrine that we hear so many church teaches is a carryover from Judaism. The same doctrine that spouted from the brood of vipers who twist scripture all the day long and ignore the law and the prophets, who persecuted the Messiah, all this stuff. That same group has a specific doctrine. You guys probably saw me addressing that type of Pharisaic Judaism doctrine when I debated the rabbi. They still carry that doctrine till today. Well, they just had an oral Torah. They just, had a basic understanding, but they had, and I'm saying, guys, no, they had books. They had it written down. There was very, very, very few things that were added at actual Mount Sinai. And that was mostly just because they were trying to help them build the actual mobile tabernacle, which was a replica of what's in heaven. But the actual behavior instructions, how you actually interact with your neighbor and how you love God and how you do this, they already understood that. It's literally the terms of them being in covenant as a descendant of Abraham. That's why in this song, Moses can confidently talk about Yahweh, who was his father's God, his father Amram, whom we read about in Jubilees. He's also mentioned Exodus 1, and he actually apparently lived in, it's a long story. I don't have time to go into it. I'm already going way long today, but so guys, this is the idea here. This is Moses talking about he's worshiping the same God of his fathers. And yes, it's his personal father as well as his greater ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Verse 3, the Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his host has he cast into the sea. His chosen captains are all drowned in the Red Sea. The depths have covered them. They sank to the bottom as a stone. Your right hand, O Lord, has become glorious in power. Your right hand, O Lord, has dashed in pieces the enemy. And in greatness of your excellency, you've overthrown them that rose up against you. You sent forth your wrath, which consumed them as stubble. And with the blast of your nostrils, the waters were gathered together. The floods stood upright as a heap, and the depths were congealed in the heart of the sea. And the enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My lust shall be satisfied upon them. I will draw my sword, my hand shall destroy them. You did blow with your wind, and the sea covered them, and they sank as lead in the mighty waters. So here we get it. I'm sorry, guys. This wasn't big on screen. I apologize. So here, guys, look in verse 9, where this is the Father, through Moses prophesying this song, declaring the mindset of the enemy. And this is something that I've never heard anyone really mention. I think it's kind of a fascinating little detail. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My lust shall be satisfied upon them. So when we saw earlier, the people, the advisors to Pharaoh came to him and said, why did we let these people go? And what did we just read earlier about how the Israelites had went up on the instruction of Yahweh? The Israelites went up to the Egyptians and said, would you please consider giving us some silver, gold, or possessions? We're going to take a trip. We need some road money, right? They need some GoFundMe. And the Egyptians were like, yeah, okay, here you go. Get out of here. We hate you. And we're suffering all these plagues, or our economy is destroyed, or our children are dead. Like we're suffering all these plagues, and we still hate you. Get out of here and go. Take it and go. Think about what that is. Scenario, guys. The Egyptians, the people, the regular people, not the rulers. The regular people gave them all their wealth. So what are the rulers saying now? The rulers are going, let's go. They have all this wealth. The rulers of Egypt would have had huge issues with the people of Egypt, because you always know the rulers are very small, right? The people are always much larger people group than the rulers as far as numbers. So the rulers of Egypt would have come in to if the rulers of Egypt would have come in to the average Egyptian and tried to take all their gold, they would have had a revolt, right? It would have been chaos. But when all the people willingly give their gold and silver to the Hebrews, and then the Hebrews take off, and the rulers of the Egyptians are like, ooh, let's go get that spoil. Suddenly they're going after a transfer of wealth, because they think, well, we can never take the Israelites. They couldn't defend against us. And they've got all this money that our people just gave them. So we'll go and get that money. We'll divide the spoil. So suddenly the people have lost their money. So they're basically, this is just showing the lust, like it calls it lust, that is, it's a lust of greed is what it is. Right? They're trying to go after the spoil that was actually their people's own possessions and money, but they couldn't have gotten it by any other way. Of like too much taxation, you got problems. Too much, tribute, you got problems. Too much, you go forcibly take it from your people, you're gonna have problems. But if the people literally give it to someone else, and you go and kill that other person who now has the wealth and take it from them, suddenly there's a transfer of power that they feel justified in stealing, that they think their people won't get mad at them. Very interesting dynamic here. It's very interesting, guys. And of course, verse 10 says, you blew with your wind, sea covered them, they sank as lead in the mighty waters. 11 through 15, who is unto you? Who is like unto a Lord among the gods? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, fearful in praise, doing wonders? You stretch out your right hand, the earth swallowed them. You in your mercy has led forth the people which you have redeemed. You've guided them in your strength unto your holy habitation. The people shall hear and be afraid. Sorrow shall take hold on the inhabitants of Palestine. Then the dukes of Edom shall be amazed. The mighty men of Moab, trembling, shall take hold of them. All the inhabitants of Canaan shall be melted away. Fear and dread shall fall upon them. By the greatness of your arm, they shall be as still as a stone. Till your people pass over, O Lord. Till the people pass over, which you've purchased. You shall bring them in and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, in the place, O Lord, which you have made for you to dwell, in the sanctuary, O Lord, for which your hands have established. The Lord shall, we're going to get back to 17 in just a minute. The Lord shall reign forever and ever, for the horse of Pharaoh went into the chariots, went in with his chariots, with his horsemen into the sea. The Lord brought again the waters of the sea upon them. But the children of Israel went on dry land in the midst of the sea. And Miriam the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out with her with their timbrels and with dancing. Miriam answered and said to them, sing to you the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. By the way, guys, did you miss that? Verse 20, it calls the sister of Aaron a prophetess. So for the ladies watching, before Mount Sinai, there's prophetesses. There's female prophets. How interesting is that? You got to be doing the terms of the covenant. You got to be in covenant to be a prophet, much less a female prophet, right? It's already there. It's always been here the whole time. Sound consistency of theology has been here the whole time. God is not a misogynist. He honors his daughters. Just if they're obedient, he honors them just as he does a man. A prophet has had incredible leadership in a community. So anyway, 21. Miriam answered and said, sing to you the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he's thrown into the sea. So Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out in the wilderness of Shur. They went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink of the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Therefore, the name of it was called Marah. And the people murmured against Moses, saying, what should we drink? And he cried unto the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree, which when he cast it into the waters were made sweet. There he made for them a statute and ordinance, and there he proved them. And it said, if you will diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord your God, and you will do that which is right in his sight, that means what he just says, if you'll give ear to his commandments and keep his statutes, that's what's right in his sight. It didn't change. It doesn't change. I will put none of these diseases upon you, which I have brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord that heals you. And they came to Elim, where were 12 wells of water, and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there by the waters. All right, guys. I'm going to give you a little. This is actually a slide from last week. I just wanted to remind you guys, because what we just read in Exodus 15 about them going after they crossed the Red Sea, they went to the wilderness of Shur. In Jubilees 49:23, it says, for you celebrated this festival, talking about Passover, the 7 days of unleavened bread. You celebrated this festival with haste when you went forth from Egypt till you entered into the wilderness of Shur. For on the shore of the sea, you completed it. So he's basically telling them, like, he's just explaining this Passover, this moment where they're trying to keep Passover as they leave Egypt. It was interrupted, but they completed the rest of it as they did at the wilderness of Shur, which is what we just saw. Just to give you some perspective of what's going on, it's something that doesn't really get communicated to us in Genesis or in Exodus very clearly in chapter 15 and 16, 14 and 15, I should say, is that they finished celebrating the Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So which is Torah. Like, they're still doing Torah, guys. You're watching Torah portions on Torah Apologetics here in Kingdom of Context. So I'm trying to show you all the places where they're already keeping Torah everywhere. Everywhere they're keeping Torah. It's literally the reason why the Father wants to bring them out, because they had stopped keeping it. They were a rebellious and wicked generation, had too much Egypt in them because they're being oppressed. Their mind was turning away from hope. So he has to save them and bring them out to change their behavior back to his behavior, back to the behavior of their fathers and ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, all the way back to Noah, all the way back to Enoch, all the way back to Adam. Always the same behavior, the terms of the covenant. Exodus 15:16-20 talked about the fear and dread shall fall upon them, for by the greatness of your arm shall be still a stone till your people pass over, O Lord. So the people pass over which you've purchased. This is me going back to what we just read. It's kind of remind you of the companion passages I'm about to hit. You shall bring them in and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, in the place, O Lord, which you've made for you to dwell in the sanctuary, O Lord, which your hands have established. This is something that's already established. During the moment that Moses is having this Exodus 15 prayer, he's speaking about the promise of the covenant, which is to take them to the mountain of your inheritance. That's what we read in Isaiah 4, Zechariah 2, that is Mount Zion. This is the New Jerusalem. This is the house of God, the mountain of God, as referenced in Isaiah 2. Also being referenced by Moses in Exodus 15, because he knows the same storyline. He knows the terms of the covenant. He's read Jubilees and Enoch. He understands what's promised to them. In my opinion, he also has the Testament of 12 Patriarchs. So he has a grasp and a knowledge, because he's a part of a priestly tribe. He's trained in this stuff. He was raised for 21 years by his mother and father. We talked about that in Exodus 1 chapter. He knows the story. He knows the promises of the covenant. He knows the kingdom of Jerusalem, the heavenly kingdom of Jerusalem has already been prepared and established. It was the kingdom of the garden. It was the Garden of Eden. He knows that. This is the sanctuary. This is why incense was burned on the sanctuary in the Garden of Eden in Jubilees chapter 4 before Adam left. Because Adam also was trained in the priesthood. They all understood this behavior. It's been consistent since the very beginning. It's a very simple story. We've just had men complicate it. This is what's always been there. In the kingdom of the garden, the New Jerusalem, this sanctuary, this place, where their actual sacrifice is taking place, it's going to come back. It's going to come back as the New Jerusalem. It's a beautiful story, guys. This is the promise. Jeremiah 31. Let's go into the Septuagint version of Jeremiah 31. It's going to follow up with what Moses just said in Exodus 15. In the Septuagint of Jeremiah 31, verse 7-11, it says, for thus says the Lord to Jacob, that's Israel, synonymous, rejoice and exult over the head of nations, make proclamation and praise you, saying, The Lord has delivered his people, the remnant of Israel. Behold, I will bring them from the north. I will gather them from the ends of the earth to the feast of the Passover, and the people shall beget a great multitude, and they shall return here. They shall return here to the land of promise. Where is the land of promise going to happen? New Jerusalem sets down from the Euphrates to the Nile, the land promised Abraham. This massive city and country that Hebrews 11, 10 through 14 says Abraham looked for, going to set down between the Euphrates and the Nile, Revelation 21, 1 through 3. This is the mountain of inheritance we just read from Exodus 15, 17. This is, we're brought back for the Passover. You ever wonder what feast is being had in Matthew 22? The wedding supper of the Lamb? I contend it's the Passover. Does that tell us the day and the hour? No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. But it tells us the event. I think it's beautiful. Gives us a good indication. Doesn't tell you the day and the hour, but it tells you the season. That's pretty awesome. So they went forth with weeping, and I will bring them back with consolation, causing them to lodge by the channels of waters in a straight way, and they shall not err in it. For I am become a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. Hear the words of the Lord, you nations, and proclaim them to the islands afar off. Say, he that scattered Israel will also gather Israel, and keep him as one that feeds his flock. For the Lord has ransomed Jacob. He has rescued him out of the hand of them that were stronger than he. How beautiful, guys. How beautiful. Verse 12 through 14 says, and they shall come and shall rejoice in the mount of Zion, and shall come to the good things of the Lord, even to a land of corn and wine and fruits and cattle and sheep. A land of what? Of fruit and cattle and sheep. It's already prepared for you. The kingdom of Jerusalem is prepared for you. Watch. Lord, 2 Ezra chapter 2, verse 10. Their soul shall be as a fruitful tree, and they shall hunger no more. Then shall the virgins rejoice in the assembly of youth, and the old men shall rejoice, and I will return their mourning into joy, and will make them merry. I will expound and cheer with wine the soul of the priests, the sons of Levi, and my people shall be satisfied with my good things. Thus saith the Lord God. There's wine in heaven, guys. You guys know it's a part of the drink offering that's commanded in the that means there's vineyards in heaven. This is a practical concept. God just doesn't have a big vat that he just poof makes wine. No, they grow from the land that's in heaven. It's a real place with trees and mountains and waters and streams and soil where they grow a vineyard, they grow grapes, they make wine, they use it for the sacrifices that it's instructed in Leviticus and Exodus and Deuteronomy. This stuff's going on in heaven. It's a very real place. It's a very real place. And the New Jerusalem, this is the kingdom of heaven. This is what it's literally called in Matthew and in Revelation. It's the kingdom of heaven that Yeshua rules and reigns from. Comes down to the earth. Imagine like a big elevator that comes down into the dome-covered firmament layer where we live in the firmament structure. And it is the central focal point for which all the plane of the earth is ruled by, is this kingdom of heaven where Yeshua and the resurrected saints are. And this is descriptions of it. It's a place of corn and wine and fruit, cattle and sheep. It's a beautiful place of abundance, which falls into the idiomatic phraseology and terminology of a land flowing with milk and honey. It's beautiful, guys. It's beautiful. You're not going to be floating on clouds. That's Gnosticism. That's Catholicism. That's not in Scripture. You're going to be living in a real place with real eternal life. You get to hug Yeshua. You get to hug an angel. You get to hug everyone you can see. You get to hang out. Just as Luke 17 talks about, Yeshua talks about seeing Abraham and Isaac and Jacob reclining at the table in the kingdom. Lay back on some pillows and have a good meal. Enjoy Passover. Enjoy the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It's called a festival of joy. There's going to be joy there. Exodus 16. They took their journey from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came into the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after the departing out of the land of Egypt. The whole congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness, and the children of Israel said to them, would to God had we died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots, and when we did eat bread to the full. For ye have brought us forth into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly in hunger. Then said the Lord unto Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day, that I may prove, which is the word to test, that I may test them whether they will walk in my law or not. And it shall come to pass, on the 6th day they shall prepare that which they bring in, and it shall be twice as much as they gather daily. Moses and Aaron said unto all the children of Israel, At evening, then you shall know the Lord has brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning, then you shall see the glory of the Lord, for that he hears your murmurings against the Lord. And what are we that you murmur against us? So, guys, right here in verse 7, Moses is telling the people, this angel that's been with us, he's hearing you complain against Yahweh. He's literally floating above you. You think he can't hear what you guys are complaining about? So I'm just trying to hopefully bring into perspective. Look at the wording. And in the morning, then you shall see the glory of the Lord. That's the angel shall appear. For he has heard your murmurings against the Lord. This is that agency concept talking about. The angel is referred to as the glory of the Lord, and he hears what you've been saying against Yahweh. How interesting. Moses said, This shall be when the Lord shall give you in the evening flesh to eat, and in the morning bread to the full. For that the Lord hears your murmurings, which you murmur against him. And what are we? And he's basically saying, he's like, why are you disrespecting us, Moses and Aaron? Your murmurings are not against us, but against the Lord, right? Because, again, Moses is trying to remind them of agency, in case people don't realize what's going on here. Moses and Aaron have been chosen by the Father to be an authority over these people. And he's validated that with amazing signs and wonders. And the angel sits there to validate the authority of Moses and Aaron. And the people are murmuring against everything. They're murmuring against their situation. They're murmuring against Yahweh. And they're murmuring against Moses and Aaron, which means they're disrespecting the authority that Yahweh put in place over them. This is the same concept of why when people reject Yeshua but claim to worship Yahweh, they're lying to you. This is why 1 John tells us this. They're liars. You cannot reject the Son, whom the Father set in authority over you, and still be worshiping the Father. You are a liar. That's what the Bible says. You're fooling yourself. And unfortunately, this is what we see in modern day Judaism. They reject the Son of God, who's literally been set up just as an Aaron figure was, and a Moses figure, as a leader and a high priest over them. This is the role that Messiah was intended to be and has been set up over us, over believers, over Israel. And if you reject that person of authority over you that the Father designated, you're rejecting the Father. This is why Yeshua said, if you deny me, you deny the Father. You can't have one without the other. It's literally the hierarchical structure of leadership the Father put in place. So this is the same rebellious heart that Moses is dealing with the same concept of agency that we see people who reject Yeshua today. Verse 10, it came to pass, as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the children of Israel, that they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. This is that angel making himself visible. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, who spoke to Moses? The angel or the Lord? It's both. It's a message from Yahweh through this angel. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, I've heard the murmurings of the children of Israel. Speak to them and say, at evening you shall eat flesh, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God. So it came to pass that at evening the quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning the dew lay around about the host. And when the dew that lay was gone up, behold, upon the face of the wilderness there lay a small round thing, as small as the hoarfrost on the ground. And when the children of Israel saw it, they said to one another, it is manna, for they perceived not what it was. And Moses said unto them, this is the bread which the Lord has given you to eat. This is the thing which the Lord has commanded. Gather of it every man according to his eating. And I'm going to briefly, I've actually done a whole video on this, but I'm going to briefly kind of recap some of those ideas as we explain the context of what's happening here, because a lot of people take this passage wildly out of context to try to say that you can't cook anything on the Sabbath. Let's look at the context of what this says. He says, gather of it every man according to his eating, and omer for every man according to the number of your persons. Take you every man for them which are in his tents. The children of Israel did so. So they gathered, some more, some less, depends on how much they needed to eat. And when they did meet it with an omer, he that gathered much had nothing over, and he that gathered little had no lack, meaning they all had the exact portions they needed. They gathered every man according to his eating. And Moses said, excuse me, guys. Sorry. And Moses said, let no man leave of it till the morning. Notwithstanding, they hearkened not unto Moses, but some of them left it until the morning, and it bred worms, and it stank. And Moses was angry with them, and they gathered it every morning, every man according to his eating, and when the sun waxed hot, it melted. So it came to pass, on the 6th day, they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for one man. All the rulers of the congregation came and told Moses, and they said unto them, this is what the Lord has said. Tomorrow is the rest of the holy Sabbath unto the Lord. Was this a new instruction? They're not at Mount Sinai yet. Why are they keeping the Sabbath? Because it's always been here. It's always been here. Every 7 days. Every 7 days. I know there's a lot of people that don't like that idea. Well, we're actually doing a video of that in the future, but if I can orchestrate it, I'm going to have some guests to present opposing views. But every 7 days, guys, just like Genesis 2:7 or 2:1-4 explains, every 7 days. They're still doing it. It's Israel. This is the covenant given to Israel. The sign of the covenant is the Sabbath. Excuse me. The sign of the covenant is the circumcision, but this is another sign of the covenant, which is Sabbath observance, given unto Israel to practice and observe. Jubilees chapter 2 expounds upon this as well. So this is the Father reminding them, hey, by the way, guys, tomorrow's the Sabbath. He says, bake that which you will bake today, seed that you will seed, that which remains over, lay up for you to be kept until the morning. And they did. They laid it up till the morning as Moses instructed, and it did not stink. Neither was there any worm therein. Why would they have to bake everything twice as much on the 6th day? Because it didn't last long enough. They had no way to store this stuff. They didn't have refrigerators they were walking around with. And they're in the desert, in the wilderness, and it's hot. So you don't have the proper preparation for to keep it. It's going to spoil. Just that's why it told you in the previous 7 verses that if it spoiled if they had any left over. They were just supposed to take just as much as they would eat, because anything left over would spoil and it would stink. And they didn't want that decay in the camp because that can bring disease. So this is literally bread from heaven, the bread of angels, as Psalm 78 and other places tell us later. But there's conditions with this bread. This is not an instruction on whether you should be able to cook on the Sabbath or not. Sabbath is a feast day. Of course you're going to cook. This is simply the conditions of the bread they were dealing with. And the bread didn't last more than 24 hours. So they needed to cook it immediately. And once it's cooked, now it can last longer, because we know that bread can last longer once you cook it. But you just can't leave dough sitting out. So therefore, this is the concept of why he's telling them, pick twice as much on the 6th day. I'm going to rain down twice as much on the 6th day so you can gather twice as much on the 6th day, but don't let it hang out. Cook all of it on the 6th day, because tomorrow's a Sabbath. It's not going to rain down on the Sabbath, and it's going to spoil if you haven't already cooked it all. So therefore, cook all of it on the 6th day so that on the Sabbath day, you still have food that you can eat and it's not spoiled. This has nothing to do with whether or not they can cook on the Sabbath. They always cooked on the Sabbath. They always prepared a meal on the Sabbath. It's normal life. This is not an instruction. Anyway, I did a whole video on that. I won't go too much into that. Verse 26, 6 days you shall gather it on the 7th day, which is the Sabbath, and that there shall be none, meaning none shall fall. And it came to pass that they went out some of the people on the 7th day to gather, and they didn't find any. So they're ignoring the instruction. It's very interesting. But so here's the interesting part. They ignore the instruction, but were they reprimanded? Look at this. Verse 27, some of them actually went out on the 7th day to gather this food, but they didn't see any. Oh. Well, we see the guy later who's reprimanded for gathering sticks, but not these people that are still struggling to understand the instruction of this. So he says in verse 28, the Lord said to Moses, how long you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? So he's mad that they did go out on the 7th day, but he's not gonna kill anybody. Okay, no one's being the punishment for breaking the Sabbath was to be expelled through death of the community. But he's not. No one's dying in this moment. He's just upset with them. He's trying to say, look, guys, I try to give you my instruction and my laws, even with something as simple as this. Tell you, look, there's not going to be any that falls on the Sabbath day. So why are you even going out and looking? I already told you this is going to happen. See, for what the Lord has given you the Sabbath, therefore he gives you on the 6th day the bread of 2 days. Abide you every man in his place. Let no man go out of his place on the 7th day. This is not an instruction telling you that you can't leave your house on the Sabbath. This is what Judaism has turned this into, but that's not what the scriptures say. You're supposed to leave your house on the Sabbath so you can go to the temple, that you would offer your sacrifice, or if that was your appointed time to do that, or that you would bring forth your son, or that you would bring forth your prayer request, or your confession of sin. Of course you had to leave your house. Don't let modern Judaism fool you with out of context stuff. Verse 31, the house of Israel called the name thereof manna, and it was like coriander seed and white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. Sounds pretty good. Moses said, this is the thing which the Lord commands. Fill an omer of it to be kept for your generations, that they may see the bread wherewith I fed you in the wilderness, when I brought you forth from the land of Egypt. And Moses said unto Aaron, take a pot, and put an omer full of manna therein, and lay it up before the Lord, to be kept for your generations. As the Lord commanded Moses, so Aaron laid it up before the testimony to be kept. And the children of Israel did eat manna 40 years until they came to a land inhabited. They did eat manna until they came unto the borders of the land of Canaan. Now an omer is a tenth part of an ephah. Now, real quick, guys, I'm going to go ahead and read the last few verses of 17, just so we're already at 2 hours here. 17:1 and 5. All the congregation of the children of Israel journeyed from the wilderness of Sin after their journeys, according to the commandment of the Lord, and they pitched in Rephidim. And there was no water for the people to drink. Wherefore the people did chide with Moses. They expressed their disapproval with Moses, and they said, give us water that we may drink. And Moses said to them, why express disapproval with me? Wherefore do you tempt the Lord? And the people thirsted there for water, and the people murmured against Moses and said, wherefore is this that you've brought us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst? They're still with their paranoid suspicion. After everything, they're literally getting on 6 days a week, they're watching bread fall from the sky, and they're still with their paranoid suspicion. It takes a while to unlearn. It takes a while to heal from bad oppression. They got some serious PTSD happening here. Verse 4, Moses cried to the Lord and said, what shall I do unto this people? They be almost ready to stone me. And the Lord said unto Moses, go on before the people, and take with you the elders of Israel, and your rod, wherewith you smote the river, take it in your hand and go. Behold, I'll stand before you there upon the rock in Horeb. This is at the base of Mount Sinai now. That's where Horeb is. You shall smite the rock, and there shall come water out of it, that the people may drink. Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel, and he called the name of the place Massah and Meribah, because of the disapproval of the children of Israel, and because they tempted the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? Unbelievable. Every day they got water. They got an angel just hovering in the sky, and then they got bread from heaven falling 6 days a week, and they're still asking, "Who was the Lord among us or not?" I mean, these guys, these people. Verse 8. Then came Amalek and fought with Israel in Rephidim. Did you guys know there was a battle near Mount Sinai? And Moses said unto Joshua, choose us out men, and go and fight with Amalek tomorrow. I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses said to him, and he fought with Amalek, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. It came to pass, when Moses held up his hand, that Israel prevailed, and when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were heavy, and they took a stone, they put it under him, and he sat thereon. And Aaron and Hur stayed up his hands, the one on the one side and the other on the other side, and his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. I'm sure his hands were completely without blood at that point. He's just like, he's in numb arms. And Joshua discomfited Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. And the Lord said to Moses, write this for a memorial in the book, and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua, for I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. Moses built an altar and called the name of it Jehovah Nissi, which is Yahweh our refuge. For he said, because the Lord has sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. All right, guys. So that's the last of the portion. I didn't have any companion passages with 16 and 17 at this point, because we did so much already from the previous 3 chapters. Just trying to give you some perspective of context of all the details that are going on, so you can have a better understanding of why things are happening, the heart and the mindset of the people that Moses has to deal with, how it relates to today, how the prophecies and the things that are happening in this moment relates to the future with the coming of our Messiah. Hopefully it's been a blessing to you. At this point, guys, if anyone has any questions or comments, I'm going to put the chat, the call-in link where you can call in live, and you can, it's in the live chat. It's also in the video description below. You guys are welcome to use that and call in. Just please make sure you have your shirt on or your hair combed or whatever, whatever, just, that way you can feel comfortable. Looks like Mark Allen is asking, Sean, was this Israel's first battle? Were they Nephilim? The descendants of Amalek, it's been theorized that they're Nephilim. There were lots of different Nephilims mixed into the tribes of the land of Canaan, so it's very possible. Conclusively, I don't remember a text that says conclusively, but it would be my speculation that there was definitely mixed into the bunch some Nephilim. Yeah. Stephanie M. This is highly debated about the wording. This stuck out to me too, as far as like, why is it saying he put the manna beside the testimony? Some people think that this has been written when Exodus was actually pinned down. It was after they'd already built the Ark of the Covenant, and they'd already put the manna in there besides the 2 tablets, which is the tablets of testimony. So this is why they think it's kind of like a summary statement that's put into that point of Exodus, that it's not chronologically accurate, if that makes any sense. So it could be that, but it also could be the testimony of the 12 patriarchs, as well as Enoch and all the other books that were passed down that they already had carrying around with them. They could have stored it next to the other testimonies until they, got to where they're going. So, all right. So we have 2 people calling in, and let's see here. Looks like we've got Hannibal and my wife both calling in.
Hi. And I got my shirt this time. Finally arrived.
Yeah, nice. It looks good on you.
Thank you. So who should start?
You first. My wife's questions will. You first. You called in first.
Yeah. All right. So, this was an amazing portion. So much meat, and it's funny sometimes how what's happening in the portion is kind of reflecting on what's going on in your life. And I had a moment, almost like the Egyptians, the Israelites. Whenever you read this portion, you're always like, how can they, doubt and murmur and complain when they have the angel? And I was thinking back on the golden calf moment, and I'm assuming that they still had the cloud by day and fire by night. So they still had the presence of an angel right there, and they still decided to make the golden calf, which just blows my mind completely.
And get up to play after they sacrificed the calf, which is a bad thing.
Yeah, it's insane. But I also had a moment like during my prayer life where I was being tested this week, where I had these thoughts coming up like, is Yahweh even with us? Like, what's going on? And instinctually that this is just you're going through something, you're being tested. But it can be discouraging at times, and I just want to encourage anyone if they're going through something right now, that remember to just be washed by His Word every day, and spend time in prayer. It's the only intimate time that we actually have with our Father, that we actually have the blessings of getting closer to Him and entering His presence. But also, to piggyback off the previous caller, where you mentioned the watchers that got punished for teaching us things, but they were actually sent to help us. And I was wondering, what were they actually sent to help us with? Because I assumed that they were sent to help us with maybe some of the duties that the Levites were supposed to handle later, or teaching us something. But I was wondering, do you have any ideas of what they were sent to help us with exactly?
Yeah, it's just going to be living life. Because men had been, according to Jubilees and Enoch, and even Genesis, right? Genesis 1, chapter 6, verse 1, that man began to multiply on the earth. And so whenever you're multiplying, you're going to have the logical outpouring, or the logistics of living around other people, which requires governance, which requires leadership. And that's what the high priest was supposed to be. They were supposed to be a position of leadership and government, which is why we see, even what we're going to read here in the following weeks, the priests, specifically the high priesthood with Aaron, he's given a crown of rulership. They were considered judges and rulers as well. This is what Malachi 2, 4-8 expounds upon as well. This was the purpose of the priesthood, to be rulers and judges over the people, to help them walk properly in the behavior of governance, to love God and love their neighbor. So when you have people multiplying on the earth and sin increasing, not all of them were following the behavior that was being passed down from Adam through Seth and Mahalalel and all those guys, right? So you have the descendants of Cain that are flourishing out, and whether they followed the Torah or not, it doesn't really tell you. We do know that lawlessness was to a point where lawlessness was increased when the rebellious angels showed up, because the rebellious angels were sent to help them with what they were already struggling with, which is to live according to how they're supposed to live, right? Righteousness. Yeah. But then, unfortunately, the rebellious angels lusted after women, saw women that they wanted, took wives, stayed longer than they were supposed to, and started doing things that they weren't supposed to interact with mankind. And as Enoch says, teach them the secrets of heaven that men were striving to learn. So this is, they originally showed up to help them, just like a priest would. Same job, right? If the angels are priests, it's the same job a human priest is supposed to do, which is to teach them the righteous behavior of God's law so they can walk in peace with each other.
Yeah. And another thing that I found during my reading of this portion that I had mentioned or noted down from a previous year reading the Torah portion was that I did some research on the wells at Elim. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Okay.
And they think they found it. I don't know if that's the correct place, but they claim that 3 of the 12 wells have dried up. And I found that being interesting. And I was wondering if you've come across that information before.
The same. I've just heard that much. I haven't heard anything beyond that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was
which I think would be a fascinating archaeological, journey, right? To go over there and study those.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and see whatever trees are nearby to see if it actually sweetens water. I want to see what kind of tree that was. I've always been interested in like, what is that? Just a tree that's full of sap that comes out, like a sweet sap? And if so, what kind of tree is that? Because that would be pretty awesome to make some sweet water if I had that kind of tree growing. Yeah,
I mean, this type of research have just reignited my hunger to just go and explore and research. And my parents have Eritrean and Ethiopic heritage, and they went to churches where people were reading in the Giaz language. And I was wondering, well, do any one of my relatives, can they read it? Because I would love to read the Ethiopic scriptures for myself.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm kicking myself now because we have the same the letters in our language. It's different language, but the same letters. Kind of kicking myself now that I didn't pick it up and actually try to learn it properly. But there's always time for it.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. If you ever do find anyone in your family that can do that, let me hook up with them. Let's get together. Send me an email. Because we've actually would love to interview someone that has the ability to read Giaz and to look at the Ethiopian Bible. So it'd be cool.
Yep, for sure.
Awesome, Hannibal. Thanks for calling in, brother.
Shabbat shalom.
All right, you too. Shabbat shalom. Okay, looks like my wife is here. What's up? How are you doing?
Not much. I actually don't have any questions or anything. I just wanted to pop in and say hello to everyone.
Okay.
Say Shabbat shalom.
Well, thanks for gracing us with your presence.
I wanted to thank you for another wonderful teaching as well.
You're welcome. Yeah, hopefully it was good for you too.
And I just wanted to also thank everyone who's donated to the fundraiser that we were doing. I think it's going to be ending next week on the 2nd.
We already ended it because we exceeded the goal.
I just don't think we've actually updated the channel specifically, like on a video of, that we met the goal, and we just really appreciate how Father works through you guys and what giving hearts you all have. I mean, you guys are just incredible. And I just wanted to also give an update and let you guys know that Tawny does still need prayer. She's in the hospital after a stroke. And so if everyone would just please keep lifting up our sister and her family in prayer as well.
I think the stroke, if I'm not mistaken, I think that there was blood clots, which led to a stroke, which led to other problems. So there's like quite a few things that she's still struggling with. We just need collectively as a community, guys, please pray for her. But I did get reported that the funds that we did raise, Facebook is releasing them to them over time. They don't release them all in just one chunk, but they've received I think more than 80% of the funds that have been raised at this point, and they are going directly towards treatment for her. So they are blessing her. So you guys, you all are awesome. Thank you so much for helping us meet that goal for them.
Yeah. So that's all I wanted to say. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Thanks for calling in. Hopefully next week I have a chair next to me that's open, sweetie, if you want to come in next week.
Well, I'll think about it.
Yeah, it's open invitation. Hey guys, just real quick, while you're here, Lindsay, just make sure we just remind everybody, even though it's like it's 2 hours and 15 minutes in, may not be as many people watching as normal right now, but we just want to remind everybody, Lindsay did not sign up for video ministry. I did. So this is not something she's always comfortable with. Week in, week out, I could do it every day. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. I don't get nervous. I don't get full of anxiety. I don't struggle with it at all. Like I feel this is something I feel called to do, that I feel like I'm in my moment, right? I'm in my zone when I'm doing this kind of stuff and talking about the Bible and everything. And so I don't even think about however many hundreds of people might be watching or that the camera's on or whatever, but Lindsay's not like that. Okay, guys. So I know that we did Kingdom portions 2 years ago and we went through the Torah portions with her on screen, but that was pre-filmed and that was with lots of editing and we had lots of retakes And we had lots of moments for us to help her feel more comfortable with being in front of camera all the time. So doing these live shows is a totally different game. So I know that a lot of you have been asking me, where's Lindsay? Where's Lindsay? I miss Lindsay coming in, and I do too, but this is not what she's always comfortable doing. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that. So I'm trying to be respectful of that, and let her come on as she feels comfortable, especially now that we're doing live. Totally different. If you guys have never filmed a video, if you've never edited a video, if you never try to speak live in front of people and have to make sure you don't say the wrong thing, or especially when you're teaching, right? You don't want to come with, it's a huge responsibility that Lindsay and I feel when we're teaching. We don't take this lightly at all. So for us to do it live, this is why you don't see a lot of ministries do live teachings, because it's a huge weight that you could possibly say the wrong thing. I get all these random questions. I could possibly answer them wrong. And then I've got, 500 people that'll pick me apart, right? It's a huge weight and responsibility. Lindsay she's not always comfortable doing that. So guys, this is she'll be with me from time to time, but now that we're doing a lot more live videos, it's a totally different game. And the reason why we're doing more live videos is because we have the software that's available. It helps me interact with the people, answer live questions. And also it allows me to do as much content as I can because of my other responsibilities going on right now. I wouldn't have the time to do this many videos per week if I weren't doing them live. So if you've never made a video, you don't understand how many hours. Lindsay, remember when we were doing the Kingdom portions? It took 12 hours of editing sometimes for me to do one Kingdom portion video.
Yes.
It was a huge deal. And that was after we did 3 hours of study on that portion, plus took all of our notes, plus made all the slides and the graphics. Then we'd have to film, and that always took 2 to 3 hours. And then I would have 12 hours of editing. That's just for one video for the week to give it in a presentable way. And it wasn't even as professional as I wanted it to be, but it takes a lot of time. So to give you more content, expedited of the time period by doing the live streams, and I get to interact with people more. So it's a trade-off.
Thank you for saying all of that on my behalf. Sean's correct. I don't feel called to teach like Sean teaches. I don't feel I'm mature enough and old enough in my walk. I don't feel I know the scriptures well enough. And I also don't know if that's necessarily my actual role as a woman. So I join Sean as I feel led to join, as I feel comfortable. And Kingdom Portions was a commitment. I committed to do that. And there were a lot of weeks where I didn't really, my heart wasn't really into doing it, but I had committed to it. And I committed to the Father and to my husband to do that, to go through the Torah with him. So I hope we might have set an expectation for people that they may not, have understood at the time. Wasn't an expectation to be set that Lindsay would just be the co-host and be around all the time. However, I really appreciate the fact that you guys love my insights so much and that you feel edified by me enough to bug my husband all the time about where I'm at. So I don't want you to take this the wrong way, Sean and I explaining this right now, that I'm not grateful that you guys actually like having me around. That's kind of, a huge deal to me. So I really appreciate all the love and everything. But yeah, I take it super seriously, and I don't want to say the wrong things, and some things I don't feel qualified to sit with Sean and teach on. So whenever he talks to me about being on with him, for me it's more about, okay, well, what are you teaching on that night? And if it's something I feel I can add to it, then I'll join him. So I appreciate that you guys think I could add to it anytime he's teaching, and that's something that's very humbling for me, and I appreciate it. So, but that's where I'm at. I'm an introvert by nature. If I wasn't married to Sean, you guys would not see my face. You wouldn't see me on YouTube. This wouldn't be a part of my life. So, but that's not the case. So I'll try to be around when I feel led to. So.
Well, as expected, sweetie, this particular portion this week, we had to cover Exodus 16. We always get these questions every time we bring up this chapter. We have a lot of people that find our channel over time, right? Not everyone has been with us since the beginning. That's the whole point of how it grows. So over time, you have new people coming in and things they've never heard before, or they bring in with them a lot of misunderstandings that have been perpetuated by mainstream Judaism or by traditional church. And so we see that abundantly, specifically with Exodus 16, concerning the idea of the Sabbath, right? So this is why I put in the chat earlier. Put it back again real quick. It's a video I've made in the past. It's called "Can I Cook on the Sabbath?" And this is where we have good-hearted folks in the chat that are very much in disagreement with the idea of whether or not we can cook on the Sabbath. And I just want to remind you guys, I've done an entire video on it. Go click the link, check it out. I go through all the scriptures. I even go through Exodus 35 that talks about kindling of fire on the Sabbath and specifically what the Hebrew words speak about and what the context is. We go over other ideas of the Sabbath and how making a meal on the Sabbath is completely okay. And it's the kindling of the fire is more about your vocation to work for money. It's not about to feed yourself. It's a totally big difference. So anyway, go check out that video. Hopefully that'll clear up some misunderstandings, some misconceptions. If after you watch that video, if you still disagree with me, that's fine. You can. It doesn't matter. But I at least put forward a very strong case from Scripture, breaking down the Hebrew words and breaking down the context of Exodus 16, Exodus 35, and many other passages to explain what is allowed on the Sabbath as far as it goes with cooking. So Judaism will try to tell you can't cook anything. You got to eat cold food and leftovers and stuff like that. But that's not what the scriptures tell us. And I try to put forth a lot of scriptures to explain.
Yeah, guys, fun story. That video came about because I was following that Jewish tradition of not cooking on Shabbat when Sean and I first got married. And he would cook a pancake on Sabbath and I would have my little microwave meal. And I asked him one day, I approached the subject with him and said, are we in sin if you're cooking a pancake? And so that led to him saying, well, where's the scripture that says I can't cook on the Sabbath? So I, of course, went right to Exodus 16. And then when I read the full chapter, because Sean said, what's the context of that verse? I read the full chapter. And then I couldn't find any other commandment anywhere else outside of that chapter, outside of that context, that said anything about not cooking on the Sabbath. So for me personally, it was a huge burden lifted off of me because I personally enjoy cooking. At the time, Sean and I both were working full-time jobs. That was like our only day to really have a breakfast together anyways. And so I get a lot of joy out of cooking breakfast for us on Sabbath morning. And it was a huge burden for me to not have to worry about what kind of food I was going to have for Shabbat that I didn't have to worry about heating up. Or trying to figure out the science of a crock pot and at what temperature the food is actually technically cooking. I mean, I was starting to get into those kind of thought processes. So I know there's a lot of cognitive dissonance when it comes to this one, and there's a lot of bucking back on that one at first. But if you really look at the context of both verses that are used to make that tradition, you'll find the context doesn't hold that interpretation. So it's not that scary to let go of that tradition, guys. And if you don't like to cook and you feel it's a burden for you, don't cook on the Sabbath. It's not a sin to cook or not to cook on the Sabbath. It's,
Yep.
If you don't like cooking, don't cook on Shabbat.
Yeah, it's really simple. But more than anything, we want people to understand what the actual scriptures say about what normally would happen on a Sabbath. Because remember, guys, like Hebrews 4 mentions, our remaining Sabbath rest that's coming for us, which is living in the kingdom, it's going to be amazing. We're going to be cooking food just like you would on all the other Sabbaths, like the feast days, Sukkot, Shavuot, unleavened bread, trumpets, like these other Sabbath, Day of Atonement. Oh, I just said Day of Atonement, sweetie. Those are Sabbaths as well. And they're sacrifices. Remember what we said? What is a sacrifice? It's a meal that's being prepared. So just like with Passover, unleavened bread, first fruit sacrifices, these are the people bring to the priests the ingredients for the meal to be cooked and made. This is what they were, first day of unleavened bread is a Sabbath, as we read from Jubilees 47 and also from Exodus 12. And they were cooking, preparing, and eating a meal. It's not, you just have to take everything in context. So it's not, don't let Judaism mislead you.
Yeah, that was the other thing that I did comment on earlier in the video with people kind of struggling with the meat eating thing.
Yeah.
And one thing I want to remind people is that if you actually go back into Genesis and you read the passage about the creation of animals, beasts and cattle are two separate categories. Father is separating livestock from the beginning. So this concept that meat eating is some sort of result of the fall or something, I mean, that flies in the face of the actual words in the week of creation that explain to us that from the beginning, from their very creation, Father set apart certain animals that were going to be livestock, they were going to be food.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of temple, tabernacle, you know, it's there. Certain animals were set apart from creation to be food.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, I mean, and then the blood saves reminds us of the the philosophical instruction. I say philosophical because it's a way of thinking that Yeshua reminds us in Matthew 12. A way of thinking about the Sabbath is not that the Sabbath, man was not made for the Sabbath. Sabbath was made for the man. So it's like you can't fast on the Sabbath. So why would you not be able to cook a meal? Obviously, you want to eat on the Sabbath. You're going to prepare a meal. Now, what Jubilees tries to explain to us in Jubilees 49 or Jubilees chapter 50 and chapter 2, by the way, again, I cover this in that video I put up there, is that the idea of going out and hunting for your food or fishing for your food or going to the well across town and drawing water, that have all that done before the Sabbath starts, so that you're not trying to, go out and do all your market preparation. You don't have to go to the store, if you will. So that's the thing he wants to encourage you to have all that done, so that you don't have to worry about buying and selling or going to exert all this physical effort, strain, and stress to go hunt down your food. Have all that done by the Sabbath, but then the actual making of the meal, that's what you can actually do on the Sabbath. It's not a big deal, guys. It's not a big deal. It's literally normal life. You'd make a meal every day. That's what you do. So, all right, guys. I appreciate everybody. I think we're coming to the end of the broadcast. We went a little long today, so I appreciate everyone that stuck around with us. That if you're still here, and sweetie, any last words before we go?
Just love you guys. Shabbat shalom. Thanks for being with us.
Yep, we appreciate everyone. We hope you have a great Shabbat today, and we will see you maybe next week, maybe not. I might be traveling. Depends on the weather. We're supposed to have a blizzard here, and I may not be able to be back in time. So hopefully I'll see you next week. Hopefully.
The joys of living in the high plains of the Rockies.
That's right. That's right. You guys have a great week.